God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome to WETA's Board of Directors meeting. This monthly meeting is conducted in person and by video conference and is being recorded. To reduce background noise, all video conference participants will be joining the meeting in listen-only mode and will be muted during the discussion. WETA welcomes comments from the public. A public comment period will be set aside after each discussion period and will be accepted in person and by video conference. Video conference participants wishing to speak are requested to email your name and the item number you'd like to comment on to boardofdirectors@watertransit.org. If you're unable to send an email, you will be given an opportunity to speak on the item after those who have signed up. So thank you. And let's see, next item is the report of the board chair. So good to see everyone, and nice to be here at the Port of San Francisco, which is always a great host for these meetings. That said, I'd like us to consider planning some board meetings at other locations going out, so that some of the areas that we serve or maybe would like to serve would have an opportunity to have local folks show up and kind of get a flavor for what we're doing and have a chance to weigh in on opportunities and so forth. And so if perhaps offline we can discuss some timing on that and some of the places that we'd like to meet. Secondarily, I'll report I spent 2 days this week in Vancouver, Canada. And Vancouver, Canada is just a really great, first of all, if you haven't been to Vancouver, Canada, I would urge you to visit. It's just it's a nice, although it was raining pretty hard most of the time, it's a really nice city, and it's all about the waterfront. And the city has really gone to incredible lengths, I think quite thoughtfully, to bring density and urban design into the waterfront city mix. And as in part of that, the result is really a very vibrant economy. There's just a lot of, I'm told, there's a huge amount of downtownish office space, and I'm told that the vacancy rate is under 10%. And they've had their share of problems too. So they're not immune from some of the same issues that we have. They have remote work there. They have difficulties with international relations with China and things like that have stunted to some degree the intensity of activity, travel and tourism and things like that. But it's really something to see when a place makes the determination to eat there or be entertained there, and water transit's a major part of the Vancouver mix, whether it's major large ferries or water taxis and pretty much everything in between. So perhaps we didn't go there for that purpose. Actually went with Mayor Mahan from San Jose and CEO Patty Poppy from G&E and folks from Stanford and various other places to some of the schools think about how to bring net zero energy to San Jose and dealing with a new age of energy in a city like San Jose, I think are very apropos to what we're doing. So it might be worth exploring some of that, and maybe at some point a visit to Vancouver might make some sense. But it was eye-opening to see seeing a place that it was really bullish on developing its waterfront and working with those communities to see it happen, and not in a thoughtless way. It's not like things are easy to do in Vancouver and you can just get a permit for something. And they basically turned over the entire future development of Vancouver to their First Nation population. So almost all the future of Vancouver that will come in the decades ahead will literally be developed by the Squamish people and other First Nations there. It's really something pretty amazing what they're doing. So with that, good learning experience. With that, I shall turn it over to our Vice Chair, Monique Moore.
Thank you very much. I concur wholeheartedly on Vancouver. What a terrifically master planned city. And they made an early decision on vehicles within the business district, which drove a lot of their development. But also they also get a lot of federal money advanced, which they then repay. Other than that, nothing from me today.
Great. I had the opportunity to attend the christening of MV Delphinus on what date was it, March 25th, a couple of weeks ago? Yeah. Time flies by. And I had one of the most memorable transit experiences that day. I started in Redwood City, walked to the train station, Caltrain into the city, bay wheels over to the ferry building, ferry up to Vallejo, and then christening up there and onto a Soltrans bus and up to connect to the Capital Corridor to Davis, and then a bike share bike from there to my hotel where I spent the night for an event. And what I'm trying to say is that it can be done. It was an incredibly productive day. I had multiple 30-minute windows and 60-minute windows when I could get solid work done. Had I been in a car that day, I would have spent pretty much the same amount of time, you know, walking to and from car, paying for parking, etc., and driving in stop and go traffic up to Davis. And it was such a wonderful day. And so I'm hoping that we will have a more and more seamless experience as we're moving around our transit system here in the Bay Area and the mega region. And I'm going to stop right there. The most memorable experience of that day was definitely being on the ferries, and especially Delphinus, a beautiful vessel.
It was great being in Vallejo for that, and everybody was, and we had a big crowd of very excited supporters and friends. And
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, beautiful.
I have nothing.
So tagging onto the MV Delphinus christening, I was excited that the bottle did crack the first time for me. And so family member Lori Wilson had a little bit more of a struggle, but she did make sure that bottle did crack. So, so it was good. And it was a really well-attended event. I heard a lot of really positive feedback from the community. They were really excited to see this investment. And then I did yesterday, I did receive a couple criticisms about on days when there are games that perhaps we have a backup plan for riders when the vessel is full. We had a commuter that had to wait for the next route or next ride to get to where they are going in San Francisco. And also the same writer mentioned that they're struggling, that the app sometimes fails, and even though they have purchased 106 tickets, they're not always able to use them because the app fails. And they mentioned that the crew said that happens kind of commonly. I do think that maybe we should look at, because when I was getting on the ferry today, I know the crew were struggling and riders were struggling. It used to be like when we transitioned that we were going to have anybody that was paying would wait, but now they're kind of letting everybody go at the same time. And so I don't know how we're tracking to make sure that everyone that gets on is actually going to, and also everyone was going to the concessions counter is where they were taking the payment on the intensely today. And so it was becoming a bit of a log jam trying to get in. Everybody was right by the front door at the concession stand to pay for their tickets. But I did get a really positive feedback from somebody right before I came here that was talking about how they were from the Midwest, so they don't have ferry systems at all. And it was just such an exotic experience, how much they loved commuting across the bay on our ferry system. So that was really great. Also, I am on the sub-regional Napa Solano California Jobs First committee. And I did submit the Working Waterfront Coalition project for consideration for funding. So I'm hopeful that that will get funded. But also, as we've been talking about, zero emission technology and electric vessel manufacturers perhaps being in the Bay Area, I would love to see, as we're talking about jobs for Californians and in the Bay Area, it seems like we also need to figure out how to get those manufacturers here. Because I know currently we're buying all of ours from out of the area. So just would love to, I don't know how we go about doing that, but I would love to see that happen.
Here on that. And thank you. So with that, before I turn it over to Director Murphy, we're going to adjust the agenda a little bit, and we're going to move item number 9 up right beyond the consent calendar. So the draft 2050 service vision expansion policy, if you're here to comment on that, we're going to take that right after the consent calendar. Okay. So with that, let me turn it over to Director Murphy.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. Thanks to folks who showed up for the Delphinus christening. That was a great event. Great to have an event in Vallejo, and we had a perfect day for it and really great turnout. Just a couple of acknowledgements to Tom Hall and Lauren Gallardi for their work organizing that event. We had to reschedule that a couple of different times for different reasons. So it was nice to finally get it done, and they deserve a lot of credit for being flexible and pivoting and keeping us all herded and making the event successful. So thank you for that. Also, thanks to Tom and Tim and Tim's team, especially for some of the adjustments that were made to the design of the Delphinus compared to the Dorado, to make the outdoor space more comfortable for folks when weather is not so nice like it was on the day of the christening. It just shows that we're listening to our riders. We're going to make those same adjustments on the Dorado class. I understand. On the Dorado vessel, I understand, but that kind of responsiveness on the design and the different amenities that we can add to the vessel just shows that we're paying attention to the customer experience as much as possible and actually doing things to respond to some of the feedback that we're getting. Thanks for raising the concerns about the boarding process. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out the most orderly boarding process that would result in the in a lighting process that would be able to maintain the best dwell times, the best turnaround times, so that we can add as much frequency as possible to the schedule. It only works if it's being followed. So we will check in on that with the crews and work with the team at Blue and Gold to make sure that that's happening in the way that it should. And we are aware of some issue with the mobile application. I looked at a great report that Raphael on Tom's team produces that shows the different issues that have come in and been raised for us by passengers and members of the public. It looked like we were getting a little more than one complaint a day about ticketing issues, and that's a lot. So that tells me there's more folks that are not complaining that are experiencing the same issue, and it was by far the biggest category or the biggest issue in terms of complaints that we have received. So speaking of the boarding process, we are trying to use that process to motivate people to use Clipper and to download the app and use the app, and it needs to work if we're going to make sure, if we're going to try and push them in that direction. It needs to work. It needs to be reliable. The alternative transportation that the gentleman requested that you mentioned on game days when we're experiencing max outs. First of all, it's great that we're experiencing maxed out boats. That was a regular occurrence before the pandemic, and we did have some bus transportation that we organized. We recognize that it might be time for us to start thinking about that now. First thing that we need to do is figure out what the cost is associated with that, and understand what that is and when we might need it, and come back to the board with that information so that you all can be aware of what those costs might be. And there are also other alternative forms of transportation that can be used when the vessel is maxed out. We understand that 50 minutes is a long time to wait. Ultimately, adding in frequency to the schedule is the best thing that we can do. And we just don't have enough vessels to be able to add in service frequency on the Vallejo route during a weekday when all our vessels are in use for regular service. So those are things that we will be doing, messaging about other alternatives, and also looking at what the cost might be for the bus transportation options. And we can have a discussion with the board about whether that's something we should do. Getting to the executive director's report, the Richmond parking updates. Thanks, Chair Wonderman, for raising this issue at the last board meeting. And we have been in discussions with Richmond staff that have been kind of limited so far. The event that was held, the background on this issue is that there's a athletic facility opening at the Craneway Pavilion, and it's a new use for the Craneway Pavilion, and it's a use that will probably result in more of the parking spaces that ferry riders are using today being occupied by users of this pickleball facility, and maybe not being available to ferry riders. And so we've alerted the city that we're worried that this will affect ridership on the Richmond run. And if it affects ridership, we're worried that that will reduce that reduction in demand for riders might cause us to rethink the level of service that we provide to the Richmond terminal, and we certainly don't want to do that. We want to that service has been growing consistently. It's exceeding pre-pandemic levels. It was a new service pre-pandemic, so it was set up to succeed. And we think that we actually want to throw more marketing dollars. We are talking to the county, the Transportation Authority in Contra Costa County about using some of their Measure J funds to have a really robust marketing campaign for the Richmond service. But we don't want to market a service and then have parking not be available at this location. And there are a few transit connections that are made to the Richmond terminal. We wish there were more. It's not as bike and pedestrian accessible as it should be, and the surrounding uses are limited in terms of office and residential uses. So it's important that parking be available for that service to be successful. We've raised all these points for the city. The city is, I think, in a difficult spot where they have a lease that's very flexible for this user of the Craneway Pavilion, and they've decided to use it for this use that might be in conflict with the ferry ridership. And our lease of the parking facilities there are also not exclusive. We have the space that's available for ferry riders, but it is also available for members of the public. It's near the Bay Trail, and so it was important that the parking be available for members of the public that want to enjoy that recreation activity along the Bay Trail. So we ultimately think we need to figure out how to make more parking available for all of the uses that are there at Craneway Pavilion and adjacent locations. And that's the discussion that we'll be having with the city of Richmond. There are still some question marks around whether the State Lands Commission, which has jurisdiction over the Craneway Pavilion and what uses are allowed there, whether they will allow an athletic facility to be used. It says in the State Lands Commission restraints or conditions rather that athletic facilities are not allowed. But I think that this user has framed this use as a restaurant and bar facility that happens to have an athletic facility attached to it. So we'll see how that plays out. And just know that we are in touch with the city and city staff, and we're hearing from. We have not important to note that we have not heard any concerns from Richmond riders that they haven't been able to find a parking spot since this use was changed. So we're monitoring that. That lot does fill up. And so we'll be out there in real time in the field to understand how this might be impacting our service. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on that first item.
Chicken and pickles?
Pickleball, is that what it's called? Chicken and
I don't know.
pickles? I don't
So
know.
Kansas City, I toured one for National League of Cities.
Oh.
They took us to Chicken and Pickles, and it was a restaurant that had pickleball courts and all kinds of.
I don't think this is a chain.
Mhm.
This is a one, just a sole proprietor, but I'm not sure what the name of it is.
Is the city planning to hold any kind of hearing, or what's the going forward process?
That's what we need to understand. We have not heard from the city what their plan is, and I'm not sure they have quite figured out what their plan is. And I think they may be waiting for the State Lands Commission to indicate what their decision might be before they are constrained by the lease that they've given to this. And some news reports about the lease that this business has, and it is $1 a year, I think, and for every year expires, another year is added to the term of the lease.
Good work if you can get it.
Wow.
No, you have to understand the history of that development project, but is there any thought about meeting with the developer? It's Orton Development, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And
Can you sit down with them?
we have reached out to them, and they did redirect their visitors for their grand opening, which they expected would be a very busy day, to use a different parking facility for that event. So we absolutely should talk to the developer, and we do want to understand what the city's position is on all of this at the same
I
time.
would recommend meeting with Eddie
Is that the?
Eddie Orton.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, he called me the day that this happened, but
yeah, we did for 70. Right, and much stuff, a lot of stuff in Oakland, very good developer.
Okay,
I would
we will do that.
recommend talking to him directly.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, a couple of grant programs that are pending or will be pending shortly when we apply for these, and these are huge opportunities. We're going to hear a report as part of the RFP release later on the agenda that will summarize the REEF program and the progress on that that's being made, and obviously a lot of funding progress. We've raised nearly all of the funds needed for phase 1 of the REEF program, and we've made significant progress on phase 2, even a little bit of funding on phase 3 of the program. But these two grant programs combined would really get us a long way towards having a fully funded phase 2. The Clean Ports program, thank you to the Port of San Francisco for collaborating with us on this. This is an EPA program. It's a $3 billion nationwide opportunity, and it will check a lot of boxes that are unchecked, that are big boxes to check coming up. The Mission Bay Terminal, as you know, has a significant funding gap, and this grant program is our opportunity to completely cover that funding gap and have a fully funded Mission Bay Terminal. The port and WETA are working together to apply for a package of improvements that would include $16 million for the Mission Bay Terminal project. There would be matching funds there that would get us to a fully funded project. $7 million for the delta that currently exists for the grid upgrades that need to provide power to the downtown terminal in San Francisco, and $26 million for one of our larger electric vessels. And this would be an expansion vessel. The larger vessels that we have been that you've already approved RFPs for already are replacement vessels, and so this would be our first additive vessel to the fleet that would be all electric, besides the 3 smaller 150 passenger vessels. So it's a $50 million application for this $3 billion program. I was in Washington DC on Monday and Tuesday, socializing this application at a very high level with our legislative delegation there, and heard nothing but thumbs up from them. So we should have good support when this application is filed at the end of May is the deadline. And then another equally important opportunity is the statewide zero emission freight marine program. This is the VW Trust program that you all have probably heard a great deal about. And we are going to file an application to completely convert our Hydrus class vessels. It'll be the first electric conversion projects of existing diesel vessels in the world. Is it in the world or just in the country? Converting diesel vessels to electric. Maybe just in the country while Sean ponders that. But it's something that we need to do to make the phase 2 of the REEF program operable. And in addition to this, we frequently are asked, well, what happens when you are operating all these electric vessels and the grid goes down because there's an emergency and you're supposed to be providing emergency response? So we've included in this application a $25 million charging barge that would be available using other non-grid reliant means, and we haven't settled on what fuel alternatives might be needed to create the electricity that would be available from this charging barge. But we would be able to charge our electric vessels on this barge and be able to maintain our emergency response obligations in the event that the grid was down. So very important addition to the overall network and including a big progress towards completion of REEF phase 2. Aaron and Tim are available to answer any questions that you might have about these grant applications.
It's very encouraging stuff.
Yeah.
What do we need to do?
I do have one question on the new schedule that rolled out. The last sentence was about the crew sign-up dates. I didn't understand what that meant. Being consistent. Kind of intriguing.
Yeah. I think you need a mic. Yeah, sorry. Need a mic.
Good news buried in one sentence of the ED report. There's been a lot of effort to promote regional transit coordination and integration, stemming from the Blue Ribbon Task Force in the early days of the pandemic. So one of the key things the operators have done is it's coalesced around 2 sign-up dates over the course of the year, so that schedules change at the same time, and so it's easier for the schedules to be coordinated between the 28 different transit operators that exist in the Bay Area. And so we had an opportunity with the partnership of Blue and Gold to adopt those 2 sign-up periods consistent with the rest of the region.
Great, thanks, Mike. Awesome.
Other questions, comments?
Okay,
Can
move on.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Quick question. I love the idea of having a battery storage on top or on a barge or like a floating. Are there, as more of the ports electrify parts of their services, is there a need for many of these kinds of floating barges? Is there an opportunity to partner with Port of Oakland, other ports that may be in need of similar barges with floating batteries? That's probably my question right now.
I don't think we've reached out to them yet, Tim, unless you've had conversations with the Port of Oakland about their charging needs. They're very heavy on hydrogen at the Port of Oakland, but that's something we can follow up with them on and find out if there's a nexus there that we can explore.
Great.
Okay, there are financial reports and state and federal legislative reports in your packet. If there are no questions on those, I'm going to turn it over to Joe and Gabe for the operations and ridership report. Okay.
Good afternoon, Board of Directors, Gabriel Chan, Transportation Planner. So the data in the report this month goes up to the end of February. And some highlights just to talk about. Our Saturdays are performing better than our Mondays, which is kind of interesting, given that there's more service on Mondays. And then another thing that's of note, if you look at one of the last graphs in the report comparing WETA to the other regional transit operators, where all three of are kind of at or near all-time highs in ridership recovery since the pandemic. So that's good news. WETA is sitting at around 79% 2019 ridership, BART's in the high 40s, and then Caltrain is in mid 30s. So good progress all around region. Happy to take any questions.
I think we're the only one of those three that has exceeded our 2018 ridership, though. That,
Then look at 2018.
Yeah.
I can double check.
okay.
The graph shows it through January 24, but is that actually February?
Yeah, that should be February.
Maybe just the other thing to highlight, which will show up as we look towards next month, but we did exceed 100% of 2019 ridership last week. Mostly thanks to Giant service. We had a lot of riders on the weekend, but always good to see a 100% mark next to the weekly ridership report.
Good afternoon. Here's Jeremy at WETA Operations. Just a quick update on system performance. So WETA's on-time performance and service reliability continues to remain high over the first quarter of 2024. And it's actually outperforming the first quarter of 2023. On-time performance averaged 98.2% system-wide January through March, compared to 97.1% for the same period in 2023. So an increase of about 1 percentage point. Service reliability averaged 98.9% system-wide January through March 2024, compared to 98.5% during the same period in 2023. So a slight increase of about 0.4 percentage points. There were a total of 136 trip segments canceled January through March combined, compared to 12,000 trip segments provided during this period. So about 1% of total scheduled trips were canceled. Then of note, the number of canceled trips has steadily declined over the last 3 months, from 70 trips in January, 50 trips in February, and then just 16 trips in March. And the March reliability was 99.6%. So with that, I'll take any questions you have.
Is that weather related or?
A lot of it is weather related for February, and then also fewer mechanical breakdowns as well.
Yeah, March was actually a pretty rough weather month.
It was, yeah. So a lot of that is mechanical.
It was very encouraging.
That was gonna be my question. So are you feeling bullish about it?
Yeah.
Sure.
99.6% is pretty good. So,
Yeah.
I was asking prospectively.
yeah, you mean the projection? Yeah, I mean, it's with our maintenance improvements as well. I think we are going to see a 99% probably the rest of the year. Yeah. In that 98 to 99%. Say.
And how are we doing with our communications when we do have to cancel?
That is kind of on the marketing team side a little bit, but I think we are making strides in that area as well. Raphael has been working on that, and we've been coordinating with dispatch to kind of tighten up those communications with our app provider. So that's we're kind of in process with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jeff.
I can say that from experience, I'll get the notification on the app sometimes before Tim gets the notification from Blue and Gold staff that there's an
wow.
issue. So we are getting it out, that information out to riders as soon as we
Yeah,
as
I
soon
get
as
it.
we know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Really fast.
It's not even late yet.
Okay, if there are no further questions, Chair Wonderman, that concludes the Executive Director report.
Any other questions for this team? Financial, government relations, any of that? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Let's move over to the consent calendar. And it's got 2 items, approval of the board minutes, and item B is a is a allocation request to California Department of Transportation. Does anybody want to separate them?
I'll make a motion to adopt the consent.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, please?
Chair Wonderman,
Yes?
Vice Chair Boyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
Director Lee.
yes,
Thank you. Consent calendar is approved. Let's move to item number 9, out of order, the draft 2050 service vision and expansion policies.
Um, while that's coming up, I'd like to maybe begin with some acknowledgements. This is I'm presenting this item today. It's really been the work of our staff broadly, but in particular, Gabe Chan has been instrumental in helping out with this. And then actually Seamus has been directly involved in a lot of the stakeholder outreach that we've done. And that's been a very valuable contribution to staff. We've had a great consultant team. We have Nate Conable here from Baron Pierce today. And Nate's kind of maybe the de facto regional strategic plan guru. He's worked on the Caltrain strategic plan, and he's currently working on the MTC Transit Plus, which is basically, it's kind of a regional service operating. And then last but not least, the subcommittee, Directors Moyer and Alba. Thank you for your time and your guidance as we've been going along this process. I think we've met almost 10 times maybe, including a few Friday afternoon meetings that I regret. But I really appreciate your involvement in this work is much better for your input. So thank you.
Thank you.
At a high level, this is the first part of a larger project, which is our 2050 service business plan. The goal here is to really get to the service vision part, get that locked in, and that'll create the kind of pivot point that we build the rest of the business plan on. In terms of what the service vision is set out to specifically accomplish, I think of it kind of as a two-pronged goal. The first is serving as a blueprint for the agency and staff to execute the vision of the board as informed by the stakeholder process that we've engaged. And so in that sense, it's a very practical document for staff. We get to meet with you once a month. We have lots of decisions on a day-to-day basis that we make. So this is kind of the proxy of the board when we're not able to meet directly with you. The second goal is for this to really serve as an advocacy piece. We know whatever service vision that we adopt, we don't have enough money currently to execute it. We're going to need champions. We're going to need support from the broadest coalition of stakeholders possible if we're going to be making the case that water transit is worth further investment at a regional level, at a state level, even a federal level. And so this effort is really, has a second goal, not necessarily a secondary goal of being that advocacy piece that can build political champions. So with that, start in on the agenda. So we'll walk through a draft service vision, and the item today before you is an information item. I think I'll note that. The goal at a staff level is to get your input, to incorporate that input into a final version of this that we will bring back to you next month for consideration and potential adoption. So we'll start with the draft service vision. We'll walk through a few highlights of the proposed expansion policy. So there's a full version of the proposed text attached to the report. We'll just hit on a couple of the highlights in the presentation, but we can field questions on anything included in the document. Gabe's going to come up, give a summary of the stakeholder outreach that we've done between this presentation and the last time we came to the board, and then we'll conclude with some next steps. So this is a bit of a different approach that we've taken from the last time we presented the service vision to the full board. The draft vision here is comprised of two components. We have a network map. So this is really the visual representation of what we think WETA could potentially, what the regional ferry network could potentially look like by year 2050. And then we have a complementary and supportive document, which is the policy statement. So this lays out how projects listed on that map can advance in the WETA development process, what WETA's expectations are for what those projects would look like, And then what kind of commitments are out there? Commitments that our partners can expect of WETA, but also commitments that WETA would expect of its partners. And so the goal here is really providing some transparency in our development process that we've heard through the stakeholder engagement we've done beginning at the very early days of this project 2.5 years ago. This is to really address providing more transparency to our partners in terms of what it takes to get a project built with WETA. So in summary, we kind of established a few themes that the service vision represents. If you have any suggestions, they have to begin with E. So we have 4 E's here. Efforts like this can really, give the appearance that they're expansion focused. And we thought it was really important to call out some of the other aspects, other qualities that we're proposing as part of the service vision. And one of the ones that's really exciting is the electrified theme of the service vision. We've got a lot of work underway. Shane has just walked through a couple of the grant sources that we're going after. Erin and her team have been successful in getting lots of other grants to support vessel electrification, infrastructure electrification. However, as an agency and as a board, we actually don't have any policies on the books today that demonstrate or signal what our commitment is to electrification and zero emission vessels. And so we'll get into some details further on here, but this service vision is an effort to really memorialize that commitment to signal to our stakeholders and interested parties what our goal is over the long-term horizon with decarbonization and electrification. Enhancement. This is a really important aspect of the service vision as well, beyond just expansion. And this is something, the stakeholders involved, not only partners that could have future service, but partners that have existing service. And it was really important for our partners to hear from us that while we have ambition to start new services, we are very committed to continuing to invest in the existing services. And so the enhanced part of the theme here is that as demand warrants, we would look to increase frequency to improve the services on the existing routes that we operate. And then again, last but not least, emergency response. And we actually did a bit of a focused discussion on this with the board back in March 2023. And it was a chance to kind of confirm the approach that we had, which is that we have a hybrid approach to our emergency response. They have control, not only supporting, but also our emergency response mandate. They're one and the same, and they're mutually supportive. So the 4th E here represents that notion. Expansion certainly gets the majority of the attention on an effort like this. So diving into this one a bit more, in terms of the expansion routes shown on the service vision map, we've distinguished them in 2 categories. Tier 1, which will ultimately be shown as the dark blue lines in the map, and Tier 2, which will be shown in the light blue tiers of the map. And the goal here is to, for the purposes of building the business plan, acknowledge that there are certain projects that have an immediate path forward. These would be the Tier 1 projects. So these are projects where we've either had a feasibility study that's determined a project is feasible, and the results of that study have been taken to the WETA board as well as our local partner, or projects through the business plan evaluation process that Baron Pierce has led and helped us with. We've identified as likely to meet the criteria that we're laying out, the service vision, and projects that are also included in regional plans, such as Plan Bay Area 2050. So those are projects that are actively in development by WETA, and will be the core of the business plan that we produce. We felt the Tier 2 category was a really important category to lay out. These are projects that are potentially serving emerging markets, areas that we'd like to provide service, but at this point we just don't have enough information to know that they're ready for development. And so these are routes that maybe they're entirely feasible, but they just haven't gone through the study process yet to determine feasibility. Maybe they've gone through a study process, and as of now, based on the WETA business model or the WETA service model, based on the technology available, based on what we know about the market conditions and development near the terminals, they're not ripe yet. Maybe there's a current obstacle that's been identified. And what we're signaling in this is that we're going to continue to study these projects. We're going to continue to try to find a path forward for these projects to work. And that can mean periodically reevaluating the feasibility of these projects, or potentially looking at alternate ways to demonstrate feasibility. And I'll get into the proposed pilot project program in just a bit. So distinguishing the expansion projects into those tier 1 and tier 2 categories, this is what the proposed map of the service vision would look like. So existing routes are in green, and again, important to remember the service vision also represents the enhancement of service that we currently operate. And then the new tier 1 routes would be the dark blue. So these include service to Treasure Island, Berkeley, Mission Bay, as well as Redwood City. And then in light blue are the tier 2 projects.
Mike, could you explain the green?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Director Aldo. The gray are the existing services operated by the Golden Gate Third. So we wanted to acknowledge the other public services that are operating. So moving from the map into the second component of the service vision, we have the policy statement. And so again, I'm just going to kind of run through a couple of highlights of that. The full text is attached to the staff report. We'll begin with project development approach, which is another way to say how does a project get started. And we've come up with a little flow diagram here that shows our proposed development process for each of the tier 1 and the tier 2 projects. For tier 1, so these are projects that we've made an assessment that they're feasible, and typically that's done through the creation of a feasibility study, whose conclusions are presented not only to the WETA board, but the governing board of the partnering jurisdiction that we're working with. So in the instance that the project's been declared feasible, the pathway to get into the development cycle with WETA would be twofold. First, to make sure that project is consistent with regional plans. So these most notably can include Plan Bay Area, but could also include other regional plans and regional efforts or requirements that come online over the course of the near-term future. Second, funding. Obviously, to move into the preliminary design, the environmental review, and ultimately the construction phases, we need to secure funding. So that's an obvious but notable milestone for tier 1 projects getting into the development cycle. Tier 2 projects, I think this is exciting in that it's a bit of a different way than WETA's pursued potential projects in the past. Certainly, one path for a tier 2 project to be elevated to that tier 1 category is to go through kind of our existing process, which is directly to the feasibility study. And this would be a process where we look at the qualities of a project and mutually decide with our partner if it meets the criteria that we have for projects to go forward, based on, by and large, the current WETA operating model, which is a high draft, relatively high capacity catamaran service. What we're introducing here, and this has really resonated with the stakeholders that we've interacted with to date, and I also think the wish of the board, what we've heard over the years and interest in looking at experimental alternate approaches to delivering projects. And what we've added here is a pilot project, a milestone in the WETA development process. So this is an opportunity beyond just doing the feasibility study, which is kind of a paper exercise in a way based on known existing sources of data, to actually go out in the field and test new technologies, test markets, and see if we can demonstrate feasibility rather than do the actual field testing of a service rather than just the study of the service. So this wouldn't be a substitute for feasibility analysis, but it would be a way to supplement or complement a feasibility analysis. And then it goes into the status quo development side of the process where if it's feasible, great. We've just elevated tier 2 project to tier 1. If it's not feasible, it's not that the project is kind of goes away necessarily, but we would commit to maybe taking a look at it as technology changes, as conditions in the location near the terminals change. Maybe there's a new developer that comes in, or another change in market conditions. That's the proposed development process for tier 1 and tier 2 projects. And again, the initiation of those feasibility studies would come through, as it does today, through a project agreement that we execute with our partners. This would establish roles and responsibilities for each partner. Notably, and consistent with existing practice, we'd expect the partners to bring the funding to support any kind of consultant work that would be needed to undertake the feasibility study, and then WETA would continue to provide its resources on an in-kind basis. Ultimately, these feasibility studies would need to demonstrate that the project meets the criteria that we're laying forth in the expansion policy, and those results would be presented to, again, the WETA board as well as the governing body of the local jurisdiction. In terms of what those feasibility criteria would be comprised of, we'll begin first with service design. So the first point up here is service planning. And this is really an effort on the project team's behalf, based on input from the subcommittee, based on input from our consultant and stakeholders, to really memorialize some of the core principles of our pandemic recovery program. So this is an acknowledgement that, you know, our services should be designed to appeal not just to the 9-to-5 crowd that's traditionally traveled from the outer suburbs into the core of San Francisco for largely office jobs, but we should, as a strategy to promote equity and ultimately broaden the appeal of WETA services, we should serve timeframes outside that typical 9-to-5 pattern. And so what this criteria calls for is that new expansion routes will support a minimum of 9 peak daily trips. So in addition to those 9-to-5 hours, we'd also require that trips be provided in the midday and late evening periods as well. In terms of market demand, again, we would have minimum requirements that would be driven off of other WETA policy guidance or potentially regional policy guidance that would ensure that the services we bring online have impact in terms of being a viable transportation mode. And they are also consistent with our high current standards of system performance. Lastly, fares. This was maybe more of a variable when we started the project before the WETA board had adopted its 5-year multi-year fare program earlier this year. Sorry. The service vision carries forward the idea that the fares would be consistent with the WETA fare policy. And you know, again, at a high level, the WETA fare policy is designed also to promote equity, as well as ensure that our services are competitive with other bus and rail modes available to people in the corridors that we operate.
You say variable? It's an interesting term, boy.
Variable.
I think it said variable.
I may have invented a new amazing water transit plan. Thanks for keeping me honest. All right, next kind of category or theme expansion policy criteria relate to environmental sustainability. So again, I alluded to earlier, you know, we have these awesome initiatives underway with electrification, but really no policy language to really to point to signal, you know, what our efforts are, what our goals are. And so we've laid out a few proposals here. The first would be that zero emission vessels would be required for expansion routes if feasible. And so where we've identified routes that could have a battery electric or other zero emission technology vessel deployed, we would commit to using those vessels. Secondarily, WETA would not be in the business of adding additional diesel vessels to its fleet. So this is making a strategic decision that the future is zero emission vessels. You know, these vessels have a 25-year life cycle. You know, continuing to invest in diesel vessels today could lead to buyer's remorse down the road as we decide those vessels aren't desirable to operate, or perhaps we're told that those vessels cannot be operated. So importantly, this creates an implication for potential expansion routes where zero emission vessels are not feasible. Those vessels could only go forward in the near term if there was a diesel vessel otherwise available. In terms of terminals, we're carrying forward, really memorializing what's been informally an existing practice at WETA, which is to not go forward with potential expansion terminals that require excessive or regular ongoing dredging. Not only is this an issue of environmental sustainability, it's also a significant economic impact the cost of dredging is skyrocketed over the recent past few years, and it's only expected to get higher going forward. And then lastly, again, a memorialization of an existing WETA practice. Expansion routes should avoid environmentally sensitive waters and shoreline areas. This is a really important thing for our stakeholders that have an environmental interest. And we had a great experience getting to know the Marine Mammal Center through the work that we've done. They actually brought us to their facility in Sausalito, and we were able to talk through our time with them and really have a frank conversation about what it will take to get their continued support for what we do.
You're not saying here that we should avoid shoreline areas, right? Just environmentally sensitive ones, is that?
Yeah, just environmentally sensitive shoreline areas and areas where there are potentially endangered species or endangered habitat. And this is, again, an existing practice of WETA, but it means a lot to our stakeholders as we've engaged them to see this written down and formalized as one of our practices. Last kind of category of criteria of financial sustainability. Expansion projects must include a 10-year financial plan that identifies operating funds to support the services. Those operating costs that would be supported by the funds would include any maintenance dredging, if applicable. And then lastly, an acknowledgement that WETA is subject to fare box recovery requirements imposed on it by various funding sources that we have. For RM2, those traditionally have been 40%. They've been suspended post-pandemic. For regional measure 3, they're kind of to be determined. Whatever those end up being, we're signaling that the rules imposed on us would be carried forward to any new projects that we have.
And so these, just so I understand, would be incorporated into the characterization of the feasibility study, but not necessarily the pilot project.
Right.
So we wouldn't need to say for a pilot project, we've got a 10-year funding source. We first maybe take a look at it and see how it's going, and then if assuming that it's going well, then we can look into the next phase.
Absolutely, yeah. So just for long-term permanent. And I want to just kind of talk through the pilot program, because again, this was something that really resonated amongst the stakeholders that we reached out to. In terms of the pilot project, this was again in response to, I think, a lot of the frustration some of our partners had with the conventional process we go about, ascertaining whether a project's feasible or not. A lot of times the types of project elements a partner is interested in, such as new technologies or potentially identifying the potential of new markets, there's just not a lot of good data to go off of. So it doesn't lend itself well to evaluating feasibility strictly from a study process. So again, this is designed to supplement or enhance the feasibility process. And the goals here would be to pursue projects on a limited investment basis, to field test new technologies in emerging markets. Beyond kind of supplementing our feasibility assessments, this would be an opportunity to also build partnerships with the cities that are interested in WETA service, build up partnerships with potential developers that are developing property for residential or office purposes, in proximity to our terminals or potential new terminal sites. Potential to build partnerships with vendors or shipyards that are developing new technologies that would like to see, make a business development case that these projects would be great to do, we have a chance to actually field test the data, the analyses, the business case that they're making. Importantly, while we are carrying forward currently a level of funding to support this program, namely through the Regional Measure 3 program. So this year we have about $2 million set aside. In subsequent years, $2 to $4 million. That won't be enough money to ultimately support entirely the cost of doing the pilot projects we're anticipating doing in future years. The funding model for these pilot projects going forward will have to be a shared cost model, where WETA will bring a certain amount of money to the table to leverage investment from other public and private partners. So those were the criteria. And, presumably a project, that meets all those criteria will be, deemed a feasible project. And so at that point, we thought it was important to characterize, again, what are the commitments? What are the commitments and expectations regarding funding? What can our partners expect of WETA? And likewise, what would WETA expect of its partners? And, this acknowledges an important constraint here. In a perfect world, WETA would have enough money to build all these projects that were feasible, that came before us. The reality is we don't. Even if we're successful in the future getting additional money, we still won't have enough money to build, all the projects that are shown on this map. And so we need to leverage. We need to have a strategy for how we use our money to bring about even more investment in the system, to stretch the dollar as far as it can go in terms of expanding water transit. And so the strategy we have here, falls into 3 categories. The first 2 categories, vessels and system costs. The commitment here would be that for a feasible project, WETA, consistent with past practice, would go about procuring the new vessels and the new system infrastructure required, to support expanded services. So system infrastructure would include maintenance bases, or administrative offices. The leveraging component here that we're proposing, would be for terminals. And this would be, for lack of a better phrase, the area where we would expect some skin in the game from our partners. So the regional funds available to WETA, either now or in the future, while we would, they would go to support vessel and system costs, they would not go towards terminals. The expectation here would be that our partners, through external funding sources, would bring the money to the table required for terminal construction, which would include landside and waterside infrastructure.
How does that compare to how we did it historically
I think
on the terminals?
I think it's largely consistent. If we look at examples like South San Francisco, they did bring some local money that supported the construction of the terminal. WETA bought the vessels. WETA created the system infrastructure with the expansion, or the creation of the 2 maintenance bases, as well as the Pier 9 facility. I think it's consistent with our approach on Seaplane Lagoon. Sorry. That was an instance where, again, we provide the vessels and system costs. In that example, the developer, in partnership with the city, actually brought the funding forward to build the terminal. And then in all those instances, we were able to identify a minimum 10-year source of operating subsidy to support the services. And I'll invite Gabe up to kind of do a little summary of our stakeholder outreach and then go over next steps and turn it over for questions.
All right, thanks, Mike. So over the past 6 months, we've done extensive stakeholder outreach. And I think it falls into about 2 categories. We have one, our meetings with local jurisdiction. We did a series of one-on-one meetings with city managers and planning director level staff. Seamus sat in on most of those meetings as well. When we talked to cities that were interested in both expansion service as well as these cities that we serve right now with the existing system. And then the second group of kind of outreach activities we did was with these 2 advisor groups that we've been convening for the past couple of years as part of the business plan effort. We have a business group and a community group that met for the 3rd time in, I think, January. And then beyond that, I also held office hours that was open to the public and to anyone part of the advisor groups who was not able to make those meetings. We also had one-on-one meetings available to some of the community groups that wanted to just talk with us for further information following the meetings as well. So some of the feedback that we received, local agency partners and local jurisdictions were really jazzed about the electrification efforts that are ongoing at WETA, as well as the pilot program opportunities that are coming up in the next couple of years. Those really struck a chord, especially with those cities who have always wanted ferry service, but it's always been just out of reach because of, a variety of factors. Maybe the travel demand isn't quite there yet, or they're developing their waterfront and they're expecting more demand to materialize in the future. And then in terms of expansion criteria, our stakeholders did voice to us that coming up with the funding is going to be a challenge. And that's kind of, consistent with capital projects around the region. But, I think in partnership with WETA, and, being more aggressive with competitive grant funds, filling those gaps shouldn't be a big issue for us moving forward. So, I mean, it definitely will be, but we're committed to making it not be an issue.
It shouldn't be mean it won't be, or it shouldn't be, you think it won't
We're
be,
gonna
or
work to
you
make
think it
it,
shouldn't
we're
be?
gonna work to make it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
collaborate.
Yeah. So in terms of the advisory group feedback, we engaged sort of a very wide variety of stakeholders in this process. Some environmental groups were represented, community groups, transit advocates. And so we ran the whole gamut with these groups. And one thing that I think was a through line through everybody was they really supported public transit in the region. And that's kind of important to having a vibrant economy and having a vibrant region. Another thing that came up was WETA's commitment to the environment and using new technology to make sure that we're, protecting environmentally sensitive areas as well as reducing our point source emissions. That was something that was really that also struck a chord. Then in terms of equity, there was desire among our stakeholders to make sure that we're continuing to offer low fares, continuing to reach lower income riders, and riders who, don't have access to a car, etc. So here are just some testimonials that our consultant team at Civic Makers pulled from some of those meetings. Again, people were really excited in general, and we had broad-based support from, I think, everybody in those groups. And yeah, I think the pilot program approach, which is something different that we've incorporated in the last year, also has been really instrumental in making sure our partners are supportive of the project. And I'll turn it back to Mike. Steps.
Great. So next steps, again, today, ideally it's an opportunity for you all as the board and public comment to give our project team input to incorporate into a final version of the service plan that we would bring before you next month in May for potential adoption. Pending adoption of that service vision, again, that kind of serves as the key input to developing the rest of the business plan. And we're projecting a time frame of roughly 9 to 10 months to complete the business plan, which would involve bringing a draft business plan to the board, alongside the stakeholder outreach that we've been doing potentially by the end of this year. And then in terms of what to expect with this long promised business plan that we've been talking about, it's going to really take our capital program and based on the priorities set forth in the service vision, begin to prioritize it in terms of the implementation, in terms of funding that we have, and really create a very specific work plan for the next 5, potentially 10 years. They'll include a financial plan that allocates those monies that we have to the projects that we have right now, which would be one part of the financial plan. The other part being it's going to identify any gaps, identify how much money we need and where we need it, and begin to flesh out strategies for how we close those gaps and ultimately deliver the program that's being proposed. And then lastly, we also at the beginning of this process identified a series of 6 focus areas. The service plan touches on a lot of them, but there are going to be other kind of goals and objectives that are going to come forth as part of the business plan. And we would be bringing forward potential policies related to some of those focus areas. The 2 that come to mind would be terminal access. We haven't talked a lot about first last mile options here about how to get our passengers to the terminals. This has been a really important thing identified in our stakeholder outreach. We're going to have more to say on that, but it'll be part of the business plan. And then the second area is sustainability. Again, we kind of made an initial step forward with zero meshing technologies here and the goal to electrify. I think there's more that we're going to be able to propose in terms of the agency's sustainability efforts, and it'll come through as a potential policy statement. And with that, happy to open up for questions. Thank you. We also have some public.
Well, first, thank you and the team for working on this, and, it's really important to, know where you're going in order to have a chance at getting there. And I think, a lot of good work went in, and I want to thank, Vice Chair Moyer and Director Alba for leading the board effort, on this, and, I appreciate, a lot of time was spent considering, it's quite a lot of issues sort of work. It looks simple when you go through the PowerPoint, but there's a lot there, a lot to think about. And I will mention on the PowerPoint, we were going to get away from using WETA and go to SF Bay Ferry. So I'm thinking that Paul didn't do the PowerPoint, but I'm not sure. But in any case, we should start maybe getting in the practice of that going forward. We get the opportunity. I have a lot of questions, and maybe I'll bounce back off and in, but when you go back to the map, one of the, what seems to me to be one of the big, we're talking about long-term opportunities. Maybe it's not an opportunity at all, but would be the game changer for the system and the region's transportation would be if we could access the San Francisco Airport and Oakland Airport. And they're not, there's no lines drawn there on the map, although you've got routes sort of in there in the area. And I was kind of wondering if any thought had gone into or planning around doing that, because those would be, extremely high demand locations that, are higher than anything else, maybe with the exception of downtown San Francisco.
I can take that at a higher level, and then Mike, please add on. But we did reach out to both airports and asked about number one, the viability, and number two, the desirability of services that would directly access the airport. And if it could be done, I think they recognize that passenger access to the airport would be desirable, but very challenging to actually pull off. Getting passengers from someplace on the waterfront into the terminal area was not something that they thought they would want to commit to being able to make happen at any point in the future. And we also asked them about connecting the two airports and whether that would be something that would be desirable. And both airports said that that was not something that they would think would be a popular service or something that they would want to see happen as a part of their future transportation plans. So we did want to do our due diligence there. We do think that there's an opportunity to still provide access to the airports through some of our nearby terminals and improved first and last mile connections for airport employees and passengers. Mike, correct me if any of that it sounds off or if there's any more detail that you want to add.
I think you got it.
Okay, thank you. I've got some more thoughts and questions, but I want to turn it over to the board. And I know we have public comments. Are we supposed to, should I be reading those, or how do we handle a public comment?
We have
There are
And I think
speakers who have
there's some
signed up to
hands raised,
speak, and you can invite them to speak anytime that
Yeah.
you like.
Some of them were submitted in writing because
The
people
ones that are
couldn't attend.
submitted in writing, you have no obligation to read them out loud, but you certainly may if you would like to.
Would the board like to hear from the public first and then make comments? Would that be better? So why don't we flash on the screen, and I think there's several hands that are raised, 5. And let's start with, I'll go left to right, Mr. Burnick.
Mike, if
Mike
you're
Burnick, you
talking,
there?
you can unmute or.
I'm
can't hear you.
just trying to unmute. Thanks, Jim. I'll be brief. Jim, as you know, I work with the city of Martinez and have for a number of years, and I'm here mainly to say that the city council, we just had a recent meeting, continues to be very, very supportive of this. High priority. Jim, as you know, it's been a priority of the council, even though the council has turned over. It's been a priority of members now for the past really 2 decades, since the early 2000s. So the city's doing a lot in terms of its waterfront, doing a lot in terms of housing. And Jim, we've been working with your staff very, very responsive. So I just wanted to let let the board know Martinez as a city council is a high priority. Look forward to working together.
Thank you, really appreciate it. Greg Greenway? Greg Greenway, are you hearing us?
See about it.
Let's go to the Alameda Chamber and Economic Alliance, and then we'll go back to Mr. Greenway.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hello, Jim and Board of Directors. On behalf of the Alameda Chamber, my name is Madeline Sadek, President and CEO of Alameda Chamber. And we really appreciate the extensive stakeholders input SF Bay Ferry has conducted to get to this point in the process, really. And as an island community, we support this 2050 service vision that includes the enhancements of existing ferry services, including to and from the 3 ferry terminals that we have in Alameda. And as the development in Alameda Point continues increasingly, the ferry services is really crucial to our business community that continues to bring new employees and critical to our residents and depending on the ferry service. And I don't know if you all know, recently, just about less than 2 weeks ago, our council members approved the Gold Bar Spirits to move from Treasure Island to Alameda Point. And that's going to bring not only employees to the community there, that's going to bring a lot of guests to come and discover Alameda. And guess what? Ferries will be crucial for that. So I thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Dave Sorrell?
Yes, good afternoon. David Sorrell, Transportation Demand Management Administrator for UC Berkeley. Just wanted to thank the board for the time, but also thank you for the presentation and especially getting the university involved with a lot of the stakeholder engagement. I'm responsible for 54 some odd thousand employees and students that come into the campus at any given moment. We do have a chunk of folks coming in from San Francisco that would definitely take advantage of the ferry terminal once it's constructed and redeveloped in the Berkeley area. But it's pretty important for both the vision, not only in Berkeley, but beyond, to focus on first and last mile opportunities, work with partnerships with different transit agencies, but also untapped markets such as the 580 corridor between Marin and Richmond and Berkeley. So I do anticipate further engagement in making sure that those communities are not left in the dark, but also in terms of opportunities with many of our students with the involvement of the Bay Pass program, where a fraction of them, while it is a small number, that use ferries for both to Berkeley and both academic and non-academic trips, those tend to work out in a way that we identify as is an untapped market through further development with, fair policy and things of that nature. So I do want to keep, complement, but also just keep in mind of the additional opportunities that are afoot. So I do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you. Don Cecil?
Hi, good afternoon. Don Cecil, representing SAMCETA, San Mateo County Economic Development Association. On behalf of Roseanne Faust and myself, we'd like to applaud this entire process. Between us, I think we've made most of these meetings, beginning with the business plan and the service vision. We've always been excited about the South San Francisco ferry service, excited to see this map. I don't think anyone is more excited than the city of Redwood City about what's transpiring there with the expansion of your service. So we applaud staff, we applaud the board, we support this. I'd also like to say the number of letters that SAMCETA is requested to submit on behalf of WETA grant applications, we're always impressed by this. I feel like there's no dollar that Seamus and the team doesn't try to find and get. And we're always proud and happy to support those and submit those letters. And I think our hat is off to you. You're a model agency. So thank you for all that you do.
Thanks very much, Don. We really appreciate that. And I know Seamus appreciates it. He owes you lunch or something. Thank you. That's good to hear. Sarah Lee?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm here representing the Potrero Power Station project in Dogpatch. And I am echoing everyone and speaking in support of the Ferry 2050 service vision, of the waterfront ferry service as a pilot program. Over the last year, we've been working with SF Bay Ferry team and the Bay Area Council to make this happen and to work together to implement this service. And we're happy to see that locations along the San Francisco waterfront are included in these plans as pilot projects. And as all of you guys know, the waterfront in particular in the Dogpatch area and Mission Bay are growing enormously and will be transformed in the coming years. Our project alone will have over 2,000 units of housing, 1.5 million square feet of commercial, and over 7 acres of open space. A lot of that will be along the waterfront. So we're really looking forward to welcoming a lot of people in the neighborhood and opening up the waterfront to those who are craving it, really. And I know we had a really nice event last fall and brought a lot of people down and saw the power station from the water, and that was really exciting. So we hope to continue working with you guys and applaud the effort in this vision. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that your project really represents, it's a proxy for all the opportunity that exists along the waterfront, and you know, how best to merge the capability of a water transit agency with a landside development and the people who benefit from that. So thank you. And we'll be glad you're here to comment. Greg Greenway?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wonderman. I'm sorry I missed you the first time. Greg Greenway, representing Chamber San Mateo County. We wholeheartedly support the service vision. I want to thank staff for all the stakeholder outreach. We're, very well acquainted with Seamus and have been involved in advocating for ferry service really from the early 2000s when we created a group called the Water Transit Advocates for San Mateo County. We've been anticipating service in Redwood City for a very long time. And we, meaning the business community, the chamber, the port, the community is ready to receive vessels whenever they are ready to dock at the port. We know that the public wants to use this service. Any demonstration of ridership is great to validate that future service. We love the Tier 1 inclusion of Redwood City. Really support the pilot program as a great idea. Getting people to Giants Games is a great way to introduce people to the experience. As you all know on the board, the Port of Redwood City is deeply involved in the planning process. Our executive director at the port, Christine Zortman, works very closely with Seamus and staff. The chamber works very closely with Seamus and staff. And, I would say the staff mentioned last but not least, the idea that the Port of Redwood City is a FEMA designated site for emergency response. The only port in the South Bay serving the peninsula and Silicon Valley. That's super important, the emergency part of ferry service. And I think I want to acknowledge that Port Commissioner Nancy Radcliffe is at this meeting. It's all very exciting for us. And the chamber, the port, business community it has your back, and anything we can do to help, we're here to support you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Greg. And without question, San Mateo County, Redwood City have been really supportive, and I think it's been a great partnership. And our destiny is certainly Redwood City too. In terms of the written comments, we received 3, which I can. Did we have a comment from the room? Someone else? He's just carefully observing. We had 3 comments. One was from Christine Zortman from the Port of Redwood City, and also from Liza McNulty from the City of Berkeley. and our own Emily Loper from the Bay Area Council, all very positive and supportive of the service vision. So, you know, I think it goes without saying that, you know, this piece of work, you know, is very consistent with what we've been discussing, and we appreciate the public comment. And let me turn it over to the board members for your comments. If you have
I
comments.
thought the report was great. Obviously, it looked like it was representative of a lot of meetings we've had here with the board and staff and other things. Like you could really see that people have been listening and taking input, and I thought you guys did a great job and with the staff. My only two comments are, and you mentioned it at the end, is one of the things, like when you put this out there, what people are going to look at and believe that, hey, we should be viable for this when they read it, a document like this, because we've seen it in the past. The thing that I'd like a little bit more emphasis on maybe is about the access to terminals. I mean, I've said it in the past with like Berkeley, you know, I still am not understanding, you know, quite yet how they're going to get people from deep Berkeley down to that ferry terminal. You know, because that's important. The part about access, we talk about the last mile, we talk about sustainability, you know, through fees and ridership and all that. But I think, you know, if we have a terminal that isn't accessible, like that's gonna have a huge impact. And I just like to see that reflected in the document. So more pronounced in the document. And then besides everything else being positive, I really am supportive of going after you know, local jurisdictions to help with building terminals. You know, I thought Seaplane Lagoon was a great example of that. You know, it leaves more money for us to run more boats and provide more service if we're getting help or having that local jurisdiction or private public partnerships to build terminals, because that's a big amount of money and it's a lot of time that we spend doing that. So I thought that was great to have. So great job. Thanks.
Thank you. Other directors' comments, please?
Yeah, I'm super excited about all of the work you guys have done. It's really great. And I just had a question on like the access to new service terminals, and also considering that with the dredging, like not dredging. I've heard like for Martinez and for Hercules, there's going to be a significant amount of dredging that needs to occur for those terminals to exist. And so I'm just curious how we're navigating that.
Great and timely question. A little background. We actually just we've been partnering with the CCTA to do a ferry expansion study that looked at several sites in Contra Costa County, and you know, took the traditional WETA service model and looked at the feasibility of doing it in several of those sites and identified the exact constraints you just listed. You know, dredging in particular at several of the sites, and so I think the approach or strategy of you know, using this service vision to signal our intent to find ways to do projects would be testing a different technology there that maybe had a lower draft, maybe had no draft at all. And you know, it's hard to you know, there's a real lack of actual operating information available for these emerging technologies. And you know, to make a prudent investment, I think a prudent long-term investment, given the cost of the infrastructure, given the life cycle of the infrastructure, you know, I think we need that information. And so I think the pilot program is a potential way on a limited basis, limited term, limited investment basis to get some of that actual operating information from these new technologies that are untested or undemonstrated in a lot of instances, and potentially use that as a pathway towards identifying feasible projects.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Director Moore.
Yeah, I just want to compliment everyone involved, particularly all of the general public that has spent a lot of time and engagement in ensuring that this is a comprehensive vision, advocating for their own perspectives and points of view, in coming to all of the multitudes of meetings. I think it's a really comprehensive and very, very transparent look at where we're headed. It will obviously change the minute it's approved and whatever the business plan approval process is, probably, I think it's almost a year from now. And so I hope everybody understands those expectations, that it's meant to be flexible and evergreen. But I think having that sort of public contract and managing expectations is really important to give, especially given the really long lead time that these projects take effect. And augmenting not only our ability to bring communities together, and particularly those northern East Bay communities, but also the ability to respond to emergencies, as we saw just now with the tragedy that impacted the bridge on the East Coast. I lived through the one that impacted the bridge here. Ferries, unfortunately, were impacted right away. You recall, just to deal with going through all that sludge, among other things. It cannot be understated until you live it. And so I'm super excited by all of the work that's being done here and in the roadmap. And we've been working incredibly. I'm so impressed by all that's been achieved to get the grants and have the vision to get the vessels and to see it articulated in this way is just so gratifying. And so I want to close by saying thank you, Mike, for leading the charge on this. And thank you, Seamus, for finding the time in your crazy schedule, and everybody else that's been involved at the staff level. Gabe, yourself as well. It's a tremendous body of work. Look forward to seeing it implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work, leadership on this.
Yeah.
Just say ditto.
Ditto for sure. But yeah, fantastic work. I love the stakeholder engagement, the diversity, the sincerity, the transparency that goes into planning and meeting with so many different stakeholders. And then bringing all of that information back and making it meaningful to everyone who is involved, and keeping these stakeholders engaged through months and months of planning and work. It's fantastic. And I think the feedback we've received from attendees today shows that. Mike and Monique and a few others, we've had an offline discussion about what was shown on the 4E slide with the emergency response. In the emergency response bucket, we're talking about fleet and seats available during an emergency. But what we also need to include there is the infrastructure, the terminals that we have, as well as the operations and service or partnerships as well, in a very, very short, condensed. I think it's really important that we shouldn't just focus on the seats and the fleet that is available for emergency response, but rather the infrastructure that we're adding and having available during an emergency.
I think our speaker from Berkeley mentioned that as well.
Yeah. Other than that, it's a fantastic process to be part of the committee, because we get to provide the feedback and you immediately see our feedback incorporated. And I think every stakeholder that you're engaging with is feeling the same way. And that is so impressive. It's really, really heartwarming to see the passion and commitment that goes into the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Other members of the public wish to speak on the item, may not have spoken so far. Let's make sure we, in the spirit of taking in the public comment. If not, just let me say again, thank you. This has been, it's quite a process. So much work has gone into it. I'll just say, when you get used to having the kind of conversations that we have, because we do get used to them because we have them, and they're reflected here, it might not seem to us like much. But, thinking about this from the outside perspective, or if you back up the clock, not too many years, the notion that, first and foremost, our vision for the future are going to be vessels powered in a way we've never powered vessels before, and of which we have no vessels that are powered that way. And yet that's the future. Only those kind of vessels will be used in the future. So, as a government agency, we tend to be risk adverse and try to do things the way we know they work. And there's good logic behind that, but it doesn't work necessarily well for the future of the planet to do that. And so to take a bold stand like that, it just shouldn't be understated by anyone. And if you're talking to your spouse or significant other, partner or friend tonight, and they say, what do you do today? Mention it, because people need to know that, big change is happening as a result of this effort. Really meaningful change. And it's not just going to affect San Francisco and the Bay Area. It's going to have a global effect when we do this. So others will follow suit, and what's unthinkable there today will become the only way to think in the future as a result of this you're doing. So anyway, thanks again, Mike and company, for doing this.
Thanks. Look forward to bringing a final version next month for potential adoption.
Thank you.
Great.
All right, and let's move back on the agenda to item number 7, which is the authorization of a release of a request for proposal for design and construction of 3 new 149 passenger battery electric vessels.
I figured it out. Good afternoon, Chair Wonderman, members of the board. Tim Hanner is Manager of Operations and Engineering. Also with me today is Sean Green from Aurora Marine Design. Today we'll be providing an update of where we're at today with our zero emissions transition, and also be asking the board to authorize release of 3 new zero emission passenger vessels. Would be the second update that we provided the board. We made a lot of progress over the last couple of months. A couple of these slides you have seen, we'll do a brief overview, and then we'll dive into some new material and then open it up for questions. We're going to discuss 6 categories today: project organization, overview, challenges, evaluation, solutions, and next steps. Project organization. We've gone out and worked with a lot of stakeholders. This is as many as we can fit on the page. We could probably fill this up a few times over. What's been really exciting about this project is how much engagement we've had from everyone, and everyone wants to work with us because of what we're doing. So it's been a great collaboration. We've developed a lot of great relationships with various agencies and stakeholders. We weren't even able to list all the vendors that we've booked on this page, but there's been dozens and dozens. A lot of interest in this project. So how are we going about gathering all this information and dealing with all this data, all this new technology, transitioning our entire fleet to zero emissions? We've developed this plan where WETA has engaged with Aurora Marine Design as our system architecture lead, and the board had previously has awarded a contract to Wardzilla as our system integrator that is helping us determine which type of equipment and systems to use, not just for our new vessels, but for our existing fleet and infrastructure. From there, that branches out to some of our naval architects and stakeholders. Elliott Bay Design Group is helping us prepare vessel specifications and deal with data inputs and technical questions, along with Marty Roberts from Fast Ferry Management. On the infrastructure side, we have AREP helping with bringing in additional power and lift tech helping with the floats and the structural engineering. All to accumulate to an RFP that will eventually go to a shipyard for construction. So how are we gathering all this information? We're dealing with brand new technology. Some of this work's been done, in other parts of the world, not too much in the US. There's a lot of information out there. A lot of people have a solution for us. So how are we getting all this information and deciding what we're going to do? So in order to do that, we've developed working groups in order to divide and conquer. We have a great team, a lot of really smart naval architects, a lot of practical advice from Blue and Gold on just how to operate a new system like this. And so we developed these working groups where we split out and we specifically talk about in different areas. One example is operations and maintenance. And so how are we going to operate and maintain these vessels? And so we have stakeholders from Blue and Gold, some of the operations managers and lead engineering technicians as part of that working group, just to discuss those various aspects. Another working group is vessel design and commonality, where, as you know, we're not just building a one-off boat or a one-off flow. We're trying to incorporate our whole system so that it works throughout, not just in Central Bay, but downtown San Francisco, Richmond, Alameda. It's not just new vessels, but it's converting existing vessels. And so how do we do that in the most common way, and so that operationally we can operate this system and maintain it in the future. And Sean's going to talk a little bit about some specific examples of what we're working through in a couple slides later on. Overview. Grants, our favorite subject. We have awarded over 125 million grants today from various different agencies, TIRCP, FTA, MTC. We have several pending awards from Carl Moyer, the VW grant that Seamus spoke about earlier in his ED report, the CEC, CARB, and the EPA Clean Ports Act. What this has done is allow us to fund a lot of the phase 1 and phase 2 of our electrical transition. So where are we at today? We currently have funding to do what's outlined on this slide. It's to build one new universal charging flow that would be installed in downtown San Francisco at Gate G. We're partially funded for the new substation. And what we're working on is trying to bring in a 12 megawatt feeder down the Embarcadero to the ferry building in order to power our subsequent phases. 3 new small vessels, which we'll ask later on in this presentation. We're asking the board to authorize release of those. 2 new large vessels, possibly a third, pending the EPA ports grant, that will, and a converted charging float over at Treasure Island. This will allow us to run our phase 2 program. That's all of our current Central Bay routes from Seaplane, Main Street, Oakland, and then future routes to Mission Bay, Treasure Island, and downtown San Francisco. One of the aspects of this that we're currently working on is ensuring that these small vessels are interchangeable and can work on our other routes and lower demand. And so we want to build these boats and design this fleet out so that these boats can be interchangeable throughout the fleet. And as technology gets better, as technology increases in battery technology, we have a longer range. Possibly we can do other routes, similar to like a Redwood City or Vallejo. Challenges. So I get the opportunity to talk about all the good stuff. Pass it off to Sean Green to discuss some of the challenges we face today.
So I've got some good stuff coming too. So, but it is important to acknowledge some of the challenges that this is a big effort, and a lot of stakeholders involved. It's definitely has been hurting that this number of people has been really challenging. So service complexity has really been one of the big challenges. We see these images you see here are actual vessel tracks of electric ferries operating all over the world. We're not the first to have an electric ferry. Or across Europe, we know quite a lot about everywhere from Singapore to New Zealand. There are electric ferries operating. So what makes WETA's transition so complex? Most of these other operators out there have one ferry or one type of ferry, and they have one charging station or multiples, but they're all the same. We have at least 3 different classes of vessels, all different sizes, different passenger capacities, different power requirements. We need to have common charging, and this is in multiple cities as well. So not just in one location. And while we're doing that, we also need to be able to still support the legacy diesel vessels that have to be able to tie up there and operate until we can complete the transition. So as far as we know, yeah, this project is really a world first. So I think it's something that's perhaps we didn't appreciate that going into it, just how big this was, but yeah, it's certainly become apparent now. Regulatory wise, the US is behind Europe, as we know. So a lot of the rules and regulations that we deal with trickle down from European regulations. So that trickle down is still happening. There are recent changes that have happened in Europe just because of lessons and things like that have yet to make it to the US. So Ra's big challenge is actually trying to crystal ball that and say, even though we know in Europe this is no longer allowed, but in US we can still do this, we know that perhaps in a year and a half, 2 years time, that's going to change. So how do we, what do we do? Do we just assume that's going to happen? So a lot of crystal ball going on here. The shoreside and floats is very much uncharted territory, and particularly when we're doing that, it's one of the most downtown areas possible. U.S. Coast Guard has no jurisdiction over those floats. It's not a boat. The building department has recently adopted a building code that now includes floats under their jurisdiction, but it's quite challenging as we're effectively building a ship to a shoreside building code. So lots of issues with that, and our challenge is to make sure that everything is safe and then make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. So we're looking at all the regulations, trying to make sure that everything is as safe as possibly be. Even the regulations don't specify that. The electric ferry sector is definitely in its infancy. Yeah, we've had an absolutely overwhelming response from industry, which has been great. We've had all the more established players coming to us with information, and we've obviously been reaching out as well. We've also had every week there are new products, and everyone's in this industry. It's boom time. So trying to actually take that information in, process it, and figure out what we do with it. And as I mentioned before, as engineers, we could easily sit here for 6 years and always be looking at the next thing. So for us, that's knowing when to snap that line and move on. It's been probably one of the bigger challenges as well. A lot of the equipment is developed in Europe, and they have different standards. So now coming to the US, we have UL standards and things that they haven't thought about or gotten certified yet. So we're having to work with some vendors to actually establish some sort of a certification path so we can use their equipment or sort of equivalency. And same thing with Buy America. Buy America is numerous companies setting up manufacturing facilities here in the US to assist with that, but yeah, definitely a big challenge. So at this stage of the game, we have snapped that line, and we're starting to move into the construction phase and planning for that now. So the R&D phase is to a close. So how do we evaluate all this? Tim mentioned the working groups. The receiving industry input comes in. Everything is managed by the working groups, so they process that information. A couple of examples here would be a propulsor and also maybe a battery. We'll take information from everything out there in industry. We'll select the 5, 6, 10 best candidate examples that we think may work for us. The working groups will then go through and they will evaluate all of those, and we score them all, and eventually we select one as the highest scorer. That component then comes out and goes into a system performance evaluation. So we take all these individual pieces of equipment, bring them together as a system, and then see how they perform as an actual system, not individually. And quite often you'll find that even though something is a high scorer in its own category, it may not be the best fit for the WETA system. So then we go back and reevaluate. Once we've got the most efficient, safe system performing, we then go over, we put it in our operation, we run it through an operation service planning evaluation where we use blue and gold, the unions, we have deckhands, captains, everyone picking holes in what we're doing and telling us what we can do better. Once we've gone through that, and then we get into actually detailing it out, which is where we are a lot of it right now. Then we generate the RFPs, one final review, and we're on to procurement. So this is just a quick example of selection. We're always looking at any given component. We're looking at the efficiency, the performance, how it operates. Maintainability is a big one. What's maintainable in one area of the world may not work here. Obviously, the cost is a big factor as well. We've spent a lot of time looking at life cycle costs through the life of the whole vessels. Maturity of it, risk associated with that, ability to meet schedule, and so primary. At the end of the day, it's sort of being the underlying principles. We come back to everything we say. Is it safe? Number one, it's the absolute number one goal. It's robust. There's lots of great, exciting stuff out there, but this is a ferry service and it has to operate. And we need it to be reliable and robust, first and foremost, and also has to be efficient, or we may as well not be doing it. So some of the solutions we've come up with, highlight a few of the sort of innovation solutions. So fleet standardization might seem a bit of an odd thing to bring up in the context of electrification. It's certainly something I'm passionate about, and so I want to give everyone a little bit of background on this, why it applies to what we're doing here today. When I first started working at WETA in 2013, this was a great example of this is the state of the vessels, and that's a snack bar in the interior is one of the best easy things to identify. 2014, all the vessels were different in their branding, no commonality in any equipment across the snack bar, the engines, the propulsors, even the pumps down the bottom of the boat. Everything was different. We got what the shipyard gave us. I think we started with Hydrostas and started saying, let's standardize some things here. Let's really look at WETA's branding. We have branding. Let's start to actually standardize around that. Maybe pumps could all be the same. Maybe we'll do what we can. And fast forward through the Hydrostas was our first foray into that. Bit of a challenge. It's all new and different. Texas class, we improved on that again. And I think the Dorado class vessels really are the epitome of that. And we get what we have today, which I think everyone will agree is a long way from where we were 10 years ago. So, and the byproducts of that is, we've reduced cost, we've improved efficiency in the vessels, and maintenance, and we've certainly helped with the branding as well throughout the fleet. So with electrification, this is actually an opportunity to take that up another level and keep that fight going. This is what standardization means. With every RFP we release, just want to give everyone an idea of, we actually developed all these sheets that say you shall use these plugs, and that way when we receive a vessel, we know that it plugs in anywhere we WETA's fleet, and that saves a tremendous amount of time and rework we were originally doing. Interiors, pretty self-explanatory. The one in the middle there, a couple of examples. This that thing in the middle is the man overboard recovery cradle. And we first started, the cradle was stored in the closet somewhere in the back of the boat. So if there was a man overboard situation, deckhands had to go through the passenger space, find the closet, open the closet, find the cradle, drag it back through the passenger space, go outside, rig it up, find some block and tackle pulley, rig that up. Well, this took a tremendous amount of time while passengers were all watching. So, we standardized electric. We work with Coast Guard, and we have an actual, I think it's stored on a reel on the side of the vessel that you see there. The deckhand walks out there and pushes a button. whole thing deploys, so we can recover someone instantly. So that sort of thing that goes into every new vessel. Seating is seemingly simple thing. Every seat was different way back then. So we now have a standard seat. We estimate, we did an analysis at one point that saves $150,000 a year. Wow. Doesn't seem like much in the grand scheme, but every time we do that, it all helps. We also recycle those seats and we refurbish them now for less than the cost of an old cover that we used to buy in the past. So, yeah, like I say, I'm overly passionate about this. So, with the electric vessels, yeah, we've certainly increased the front end design that we're doing. All the standardization takes a lot of design on the front end. It actually helps the shipyards as well, because now they just get the specification. It's very easy for them to bid. So they're no longer inflating their prices or having to margin things, you know, when they provide us a price. So they're all very happy because they get to spend more time on, yeah, you end up with a more accurate bid. So we're very weight and performance sensitive, so we really can't give the shipyard a lot of latitude in some areas to just like things that may not fit, and we just cannot afford to have these vessels coming overweight that will not perform. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we don't have that on our hands. So the focus areas for front end design and standardization have really been the propulsion system, the operation of the vessel, we're looking at the pilot house. We're looking at making sure that there's a lot of muscle memory and things are they're the same as the Delphinus or some of the other vessels. You want the operator and captain to come on board and not have to figure out where the radio is. I think should be similar as possible to the other vessels. So we're actually looking at a very much standard pilot house now. And mooring and docking there are changes with the electric boat that we're having to work through the system. And the interior outfit, passenger experience. The passenger experience is something that we're very interested in. We want passengers to have a premium experience on the ferries. So, universal charging float, I think we've seen that nothing has really changed on this. We're working through the regulatory side. This is one of the more challenging that we're doing, where we have the batteries and all the charging equipment in the floats. So there are so we have a big team working on this. To be honest, this is almost more difficult than floats. So it's getting a lot of our attention. Integral boarding ramps is something that we're going to do a pilot project on small boats. Right now, we probably all seen this. The vessel comes into dock, and two deckhands have to jump off the boat on the gangway. They walk down, they pick up the ramp, go back, and they cleat it into the side of the boat. They then both walk up the ramp. They then have to lash it down, tighten it up. All well, the riders and passengers are waiting for what seems like 10 minutes, even though it's probably 30 seconds. So we're looking at this as an opportunity to make this safer and faster for everybody. So we're looking at integral boarding ramps, which there's examples all over the world. Here's one from Europe. So the ramp is actually carried on the vessel. One of the deckhands will now walk up, push a button, ramp will deploy automatically. Meanwhile, the second deckhand can now go into boat himself to charging. So that's helps quite a bit. Probably one of the biggest things that no one will ever see that we're pretty proud of here is the modular propulsion system. So we have large vessels and small vessels right now. We have one common propulsion system. Both the large vessel will have two of these per hull, and the small vessel will have one. This means that the actual propulsor unit down the back end of the boat will be identical throughout the entire fleet. We can change between them all the way through the charging systems, DC grid, and the batteries will all be identical. So this single modular propulsor unit means that it's going to cut down on the spares and training and everything else, and familiarity will be absolutely fantastic. So I think this has been quite a challenge to make this happen, but it's also we've been looking at other vessels in the future, making sure it'll work for that. So yeah, this is something we're big and proud of. the drive itself, we've been working with the vendors. We have selected one we're working with now. We're taking their standing unit, we're actually working with that vendor to develop a really specific housing around it that will insert in the back of the boat. So this will save a lot of time for the shipyards actually having to do complex alignments and figure out a lot of structure themselves. They simply buy this component and weld it into the back of the boat. So another benefit for this unit is that we can actually remove it in the water. So this is the first. Normally they damage a propeller or have an issue with one of the propulsors. That normally traditionally means we're going to dry dock. And that's somewhere between $30,000 to $80,000 to go in there and swap one of these out. With this unit that we're developing here, we now have the option of doing that in the water with the maintenance staff. It can be a tremendous savings and increase the turnaround time. Certainly minimize any service disruptions. So all the stuff we're thinking about. So I'll turn it back over to Tim.
Thanks, Sean. Next steps. All right, meat and potatoes, construction. Plan on releasing 3 RFPs. One for the small vessel, one for the 3 small vessels, one for the 2 to 3 large vessels, pending grant award, and one for universal charging floats. Today we're asking the board, and there's a staff report that outlines that requests authorization to release the request for proposal and design for the construction of 3 new 149 passenger battery electric vessels. The large vessel and the universal charging float, we have already come to the board and asked you for authorization to release. We plan on releasing all 3 of these RFPs in July of this year of 2024. RFP criteria. So this is a generalization of how we score various RFPs for construction projects. And so we're looking at a bunch of varying factors. Previous slide showed some of the detail. This is kind of a sum up of all those categories, and it's technical approach, qualifications and experience, vessel design and detailed technical information, the schedule, vessel matrix and operational characteristics, and price.
When you say, quick question, experience, does the experience mean experience of the organization or experience of the team or both?
It's both. It's experience of the organizational staff, the staff that's there, everyone from the shipyard owner to the leads that are doing the various trades, to experience with shipbuilding in general.
And I'll take the next slide, Tim. So, this is the last of 3 really important authorizations for RFPs to complete phase 1 of our REEF program. And so we wanted to give the board some insight into the latest thinking as Wärtsilä and the rest of the consultants working on this program have been doing their work. And also some understanding in terms of the process that we're going to move forward with on the criteria. And it's come up as we've gotten closer. Obviously, it's important. It's an important question to ask. We're raising a significant amount of funding, and we're planning to spend that funding on some groundbreaking new technologies. Now, where will all this work happen? And we're going to get some proposers on these vessel builds and the corresponding floats. We would, of course, love to keep these funds local here in the Bay Area, and that is something that we want to offer some more insight into, because there are some significant challenges in terms of doing that. Number one, we just have a lack of maritime industry in the Bay Area, and we've talked before at board meetings and as agency staff about the importance of propping up and using this as an opportunity to incentivize the creation of a more robust maritime industry in the Bay Area. We're not going to have time to do that before we need to build these vessels. There are no Bay Area shipyards that are capable, we believe, of building these vessels, but we'll see if we get proposals. I only say that because no shipyard has proposed in the past to build any WETA vessels. And so we would like that. We would like to change that. We think that that involves a discussion with the board about some strategies for how to make that change happen. There are some constraints involved. One big constraint is that when we're using federal funding, and we have federal funding sprinkled throughout this program, and we will continue to have federal funding sprinkled throughout this program, we cannot procure vessels using federal funding and have a preference for local hire involved in the RFP. That's a constraint, because if we could include a preference for hiring locally, that would inspire, we believe, more shipyards to think about doing business, to think about creating facilities here in the Bay Area. And that would allow us to potentially keep these dollars in the Bay Area. We're looking at changing that federal rule. We have had conversations recently with the sponsors of the Ferry Service Expansion Act, which will be introduced shortly, thanks to the hard work from Lauren and our lobbying team. Congressmember Garamendi is the chief sponsor of that legislation in the House, and he has co-sponsors from our two senators and other members of the House from maritime interested districts around the country. So they're all on board. Our Bay Area contingent, our California senators are on board with including language in that act that would allow us to, for vessel procurements, have a local hire preference in our procurements. This is not something that happens overnight. It's something that happens through reauthorization of a surface transportation bill, which is, a multi-year process. But it's something that we believe would move the needle in terms of incentivizing the creation of a more robust maritime industry in the Bay Area. The other part is workforce. We hear from folks, shipbuilders and vessel builders around the world, really, that the lack of skilled workforce in the Bay Area is a constraint. And fortunately, we have a new organization, still new, Working Waterfront Coalition, that's working to change that. Our involvement and commitment to helping to further this cause, our agency's commitment to helping to further this cause will hopefully change this. And so we have high hopes for the Working Waterfront Coalition to do their work. One of the things that we've been working on the with the coalition to do is to include in our grant applications that we will partner with them and spend some of those grant dollars working with them to create more workforce and to get the skilled and qualified labor necessary to do the work on our projects. And they're prepared and have the capacity to do that. There are other strategies we believe that need to be explored. And we think that the best way to do this is probably, because these conversations have been happening sort of here and there, to have a board focused discussion at a board meeting where we can talk about what our goals are with respect to San Francisco Bay Ferries, involvement in these efforts, and what can we be investing our resources in that will have the highest propensity for moving the needle and creating a more effective and more available maritime industry around the Bay Area. So put your thinking caps on, please, before we have this discussion. We definitely want some guidance in terms of what the goals should be and what the strategies should be for this agency to help achieve those goals. So that will be coming up, and wanted to make sure we touch on this as a part of this item, because after the board hopefully approves the release of this RFP, we are really off and running. And there's going to be awards coming your way soon for shipyards to do this work. And there's more coming after that. And we want to make sure that some of this work happens in between those actions so that hopefully eventually we'll be able to award contracts to Bay Area organizations to do future work for this organization. With that, Tim, I don't think you have anything else, Chair Wonderman, so we'll turn it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation and appreciate that there's a tremendous amount of thinking and you spoke to the complexity of it and there's more than enough of that in order to get something like this done. And it's it's very encouraging to kind of see the line of action that's being taken and the opportunity that we have to do this and the opportunity not to make huge mistakes by not having thought through kind of critical path elements in it and so forth. I have a bunch of different questions. The first one is on the power substation. One of the things I garnered from and sort of the purpose of our trip to Vancouver was that they're really looking at net zero 2030 and how to implement that. And one of the key strategies is to, for example, and it's just an example, utilize the power churn from data centers and use the power then to power residential structures. Not something we would have done in the past. We'd create a power plant and we'd build a building and the power plant would emit all this excess energy, heat, and then the building would suck up a bunch of natural gas or whatever the power source was. And so, they're looking at it, and this is not a strange idea to us, that we would, kind of combine functions. So if we're going to build a new 12 megawatt plant, that somehow we could combine that with some other, it's in a downtown area. So there's a lot of, power being generated in that area already. Is there some way we could recapture some of that power through, and so we're not doubly producing the power demand and placing more stress on the grid?
So are you asking, are we getting it from renewable sources or?
What's our thinking about where the power will come from for that, from the substation? What's going to be the power source for that?
I don't have an answer for that. I don't know.
Tim, could I jump in for a second? And I'm very sorry to interrupt, but I think this is probably why Seamus suggested we have a board workshop. The presentation you just received was as background for the recommended action, which is to release an RFP for these vessels. And a discussion of all of these interesting things is not exactly on the agenda topic. And so I guess I would request that you focus on this RFP and save these other issues for further identified workshop.
Okay,
sorry, what's that?
why don't we just agree that
Oh, sorry.
maybe we're going to look at the, look at that issue of how we're going to power this.
Got it.
So on the, I'll go to the RFP itself. We don't have the RFP language in the book. I thought in the past we actually approved an RFP and it had the authorizing language, but I don't see it here. Is that not typical? Am I wrong about that?
I don't believe we've ever done that.
You mean you don't see the actual art request for proposals in the packet? I'm sorry.
I don't.
We haven't typically done that in the past. We've asked for authorization to release.
Under WETA's administrative code, WETA may only issue an RFP or a bid of any kind upon authorization by the board. It's an unusual, in the industry, that's an unusual step. But it's never been WETA's practice to provide the board in advance with a copy of the solicitation documents at the time it requests that approval.
Okay. Maybe I'm not remembering it properly. So.
And this is, you're not authorizing a contract. You're not doing anything besides just, hey, put a document out on the street.
Right. But what, the quality of what you get back is a function of what you put out in an RFP. So if you put out an RFP to, that seeks to accomplish certain things, you typically get those things and you don't get other things. And this is sort of a lot of new territory. And it kind of gets to the last slide that Seamus brought up, which is something I've raised ad nauseum, over the last couple of years, which is that, the way I see this, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, in my view, to be able to rebirth the maritime industry in the Bay Area, because we have so much financial leverage to do it. And I'm concerned, and I've made this clear, I'm concerned that, when we do this, because of the issues that are revealed, that, this one will get by us, and we'll basically be empowering others to be able to, no one else has ever built, we may never have, no Bay Area shipyard has ever bid on a WETA vessel, but no American shipyard has ever bid on an electric ferry, as far as I know, maybe a small one somewhere. So this is new. And yes, clearly having maritime industry, the workforce and physical facilities and all that is an advantage. But, often the buyer, who brings in a whole bunch of money has some clout. And, I'm concerned that we're going to basically enable, our competitors in other parts of the country to get ahead of us on this. And when the next round of this comes, and the next round, we won't be able to compete, because we still won't have a workforce, because you only generate the workforce when you do the work. We can train people all we want, but if we're not building these things here, we're going to, we're not going to be able to compete with people who have now built them somewhere else. And I also think that because of the complexity that you took us through, building these vessels for the first time ever in the United States, hundreds or thousands of miles away from where they're going to be put in service, is a disadvantage. You'd much rather have your place of manufacture be, close to use, so that when there's a lot of learning that's going to happen between here and there. And that learning is going to take place at a great distance from the ultimate user and buyer of the service. So I'm concerned about that. I think, I guess I have a question, Stephen, maybe it's a question for you, but if we're not on a federal funded project like this, if we're not allowed to stipulate that we could have local workforce, could we stipulate that we have local manufacture? I mean, let them import the workforce from wherever they want.
One of the many strings that accompany federal grant funding is the requirement to avoid any requirement that, in the federal government's perspective, restricts competition, and geographic restrictions of any sort from the federal government's perspective are found to be unfair restrictions to competition. So the answer to your question is no.
So,
but you can, sorry, if I just, because I don't know, it's not a universally beloved answer.
It isn't the answer I was expecting.
As you saw in an earlier slide, an RFP to buy a new ferry, and I just emphasize we're buying a new ferry, like buying a bus or buying, we're not building a new hospital or something, we're buying a ferry. It is a subjective set of criteria for what presents the best value to the organization. It's not just on the low bid. So you saw those evaluation criteria. Yeah. So we can ask questions and elicit responses from proposers that will provide a lot of the kind of information that you're looking for, I think. And I'm already working with staff, and Seamus is working with staff to try and underscore those without violating the geographic preference restrictions that I just mentioned.
I mean, I've made this speech in places around the world, with audiences made up of manufacturers of, maritime equipment, who have then, voluntarily come over to me and say, we'd be very interested in building in the Bay Area. That's very exciting, and all of that. So I think, in order to be, I think this is very hard. I think this whole thing is very hard. What we are undertaking is very hard. And I'm worried that we're going, we're being too, I don't know exactly what the right word is, but we're accepting the fact that this, we really can't do this. And it's just too, it's just too difficult. It's never been done before and so forth. But, remember, we're sitting here in a region, right here where ships were being built en masse, right here, right here en masse. So, we supplied the ships for World War II right here. So the ferry boat that I live on part of the time was built in the Bethlehem shipyard, 1924, right here. And that's what we did. And, a lot of folks are interested in how do we diversify the Bay Area economy and try to balance out the, this over reliance on high tech. Well, this is in part high tech. So it's in my view, it's an incredible joining of high tech and blue collar work. And it's, we should be doing anything and everything possible, even though it's really hard, even though we are down in the game, even though, there are severe disadvantages, we should be really thinking about this and not just, as the more we put over this thinking, the more we're going to find ourselves at a deeper disadvantage. And at some point, this won't be that strange. This is going to happen, right? As you pointed out, like it's already happened in Europe. So we're not the first. We're just potentially the first in America. I think we should try a little harder and be a little more creative. And, I realize CARB wants us, and we have agreed to produce these vessels by a time certain. But, if that's what we've agreed to do, then I would say, well, we've agreed to transfer the wealth of this region to another region in the country by a time certain. And I don't like it, and I don't think it's a good idea. So, anyway, that's I guess that's my point.
I guess I have a question on I know we've never been shown an RFP or done an RFP the way that was brought up. Is it possible to have more input on an RFP and more questions from the board? Is the board able to? Because I know I've been in an RFP process, not for boats or building of boats or sent out for, manufacturing, but I've been in RFP processes for ambulance contracts and stuff where all the stakeholders came in and had an opportunity to say their input. And, on this subject specifically, I'm not going to repeat what Jim says. I obviously agree with everything he says. And I know we're constrained by federal law and things like that, but, so even prior to you being here, Seamus, we've talked about ferries and the need to have manufacturing ability in the Bay Area. And how do you go about doing that? Do you build a coalition with labor and manufacturers, and how does it go? And I do agree with Jim, this is going to be a missed opportunity, because if these boats get built somewhere else, then that jurisdiction is going to be way ahead of us. And we're putting this time and money into this workforce development program and trying to get that off the ground. What's the use of training people if they're going to end up in Seattle working on a boat? Honestly, that's kind of where I'm at with it too. So I won't keep going, but I do agree with everything Jim said.
Yeah, let me start, and then I think I'll ask Steve and Tim to chime in. But we're constrained by federal law, but we're also constrained by the facilities that are available in the Bay Area to just do the work. And if we were not constrained by federal law, and we said, we want to just say that this work has to be done in the Bay Area, and these 3 vessels that you're authorizing us to release an RFP to procure, that they will be built in the Bay Area. We only want to hear from proposers that will do that, that are qualified to do that. It's questionable whether we would get any qualified proposals. So that is a major challenge that, unfortunately, over the many years where this conversation has been had at this board and at this agency, nothing has happened to change the fact that there aren't enough options and maybe any options for doing this work in the Bay Area. And that's the thing that we should be focused on changing. And if we can change the federal requirement, it will provide an incentive for people to come and for shipyard owners and potential future shipyard owners to build shipyards here in the Bay Area that are capable and large enough to be able to do this work, to build these electric vessels. That's what we need to happen. So we want to have a conversation about what San Francisco Bay Ferry can do to incentivize that change and inspire that change to happen, so that down the road, when we're building more vessels, which we will be procuring more vessels, because this is just the beginning. We won't need to worry about the fact that there are not any, that there are limited local options. We'll know that there will be proposers that will be submitting and applying to build these vessels. And then I think on the RFP process, we have a unique process, having worked for several public agencies. Most public agencies don't ask the board for authorization to release an RFP. They release the RFP administratively and then ask the governing board to award the contract and explain the basis for the recommendation for the award. But Steve, is that generally how it works? And
that is generally how it works. And I think, staff's job is to produce and my job to help the staff is to produce a solicitation document that achieves a policy goal set by this board, but that the mechanics of the procurement require some very specialized engineering, technical, administrative, procurement, legal work all in tandem that is traditionally not considered board policy work, so that the board is presented, staff presents an award to you to buy a diesel boat that can only go 5 miles an hour that could not serve Vallejo. It's going to be very embarrassing for staff when you reject that award 5-0, and they're going to, so staff doesn't want that to happen. And so we're all working very hard to produce a solicitation document that is consistent with the goals that you put forward. Jim has raised now a policy goal of local hire that we're wrestling with, because there are both practical, legal, and technical challenges associated with reaching that policy goal. But I guess I would suggest that increased board involvement in the mechanics of the solicitation process may not be the best way to achieve the goal you're looking for, and the kind of a board workshop on how RFPs work and where the policies, how the rubber hits the road and where policies get transformed into solicitations might be a more productive way for staff to hear from you as to what you want to see in WETA solicitation.
Even though San Francisco Bay Ferry, not WETA, I'm trying, we're gonna have like a square jar.
Yes.
But even though our process is a little unconventional, I like this item coming to the board, because this is the opportunity for the board to provide some input into what these RFPs should or should not include, and for staff to do some thinking and respond to those suggestions, like we have with the local hire issue. And then there are, for stakeholders that are not the board, for industry stakeholders, Tim, we have a whole separate exhaustive process that we go through with the industry to learn from them what these solicitations should look like, and to make sure that we're going to get qualified bids from the industry, correct? Can you describe that process a little bit?
Yeah, so we do a lot of outreach to industry, people that we know of, and then, the teams that we're working with are construction managers, anyone that they might know of where there would be an opportunity to bring some new or different yards into our process. Specifically like a new yard, let's say just recently, in the last couple of years, we've got Lynn Marine to bid on some of our repair work. And we still, today we go to Lynn Marine at every dry dock. We ask them to provide a quote for us to do a routine dry dock. And we ask Bay Ship, those are the 2 yards in the Bay Area that are capable of doing the work. That's been great for us because we get a little bit of competition. And we were able to shift some of those resources over to Vallejo. Unfortunately, it's really tough for the Marine to dry dock our boats, and it costs a lot. So a lot of the times they're not capable of doing it, but we still at every chance we get, we still go out and ask them to provide a quote and see if they are able to do that work. Some of the things that we've done in the past is we've done an exhaustive search of shipyards up and down the West Coast, and even in the Midwest. we've looked at yards in, the East Coast, but the transport from constructing to delivering is a little bit too high for them to bid on it. But what we've done most recently is we've toured, up and down the West Coast, starting in Southern California, the shipyards that we know that are capable or that might be capable with some guidance from us. You don't have to be, have all the experience in the world. But if you have the ability to build ships, it's a very specialized craft, especially aluminum ferries, very different from steel. But if we can work with them and guide them and they can get the right resources in place, we're willing to take that into account. And so we're constantly looking for more yards. It's not just a problem in the Bay Area, it's a problem with our new builds now, even if we're not talking about the Bay Area. There's not enough yards out there building new ships in the US as a whole. And so we're constantly looking for new opportunities for us to be able to work with different people.
Well, I would just say you have a responsibility to, take the inputs, the, financial support and the technical knowledge and produce a vessel. And you want to do a really good job of that. You want it to work out well. I'm putting forth that you've got another job in addition to that, which is to see yourself as a steward of the regional economy in the Bay Area, which is not in your job description, right? And you don't necessarily think of your job like that, but I think of my job like that. And that's why the governor appointed me to this job. Okay, because I had that conversation with him years ago and talked about this and said, we agreed we should be, trying to go in this direction and integrate, if we're going to develop a system, it should become integrated more greatly with the Bay Area economy. And, a lot of the work that we're doing is to try to, talked about some of the items in the plan, the service plan, as becoming more integrative between, the water transit service and the development on the land side. A lot of the vision plan is about how to accomplish that. Thinking about that. And so this, in my view, is really part of that. And it requires bigger thinking and bigger doing. Workforce development is not a strength of the Bay Area. That's why there's this Working Waterfront Coalition. It's being put together in the absence of a very good workforce development system in the region. In other regions, they do this stuff great. It's all they think about. Go to Houston, see what they think about Houston, how they do what they do, or Seattle in that region, right? They're very good at this, right? And thinking about, high school. All this stuff in order to be competitive in certain areas, and why they're able to make airplanes and why we're not making airplanes, right? And it's things like that. So they're very thoughtful about this. And I think in this area, we're at risk because we're too highly concentrated in a very important area, high technology. But we're also paying a price for that. And we should, understand that we're paying a price for it and start to make the adjustment where the opportunity exists. And so, back 6 years ago or so, the voters of the Bay Area voted for Regional Measure 3, and they voted for hundreds of millions of dollars of capital for ferries to put confidence in the notion that we could build out a ferry system. And along the way, somebody told us that, nah, you can't build a ferry system with those old kind of boats. No matter how clean you think they are, you're going to have to invest in a new type of boats. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to spend, really pretty vast amounts of money and ask for more money, and probably eventually go back to the voters and ask for more money to do this. And, what I hate to see is every time you pay the toll, you get a little, instead of saying toll paid, it says the state of Washington thanks you, because your money's being transferred up to the state of Washington to build this new technology and make them more competitive. So I just feel we should go the extra mile here and figure out, Seamus, you said, put your thinking caps on. So I'll ask you to do the same. Think about how we can get in front of this, right? You're Stephen's right. We just set policy. So, in my view, I hope the board agrees. The policy should be do everything that we can to attract and develop this industry, this new, exciting, important industry in this region. And then your job should be to figure out how to do it. Come back to us and tell us how you're going to do it and not how you can't do it. So I know that's hard. Maybe it sounds unfair, but go ahead, Director Duke.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on a lot of the points you've made, and maybe, maybe it's not part of the RFP process. Maybe it's an initiative that we create that is a local industry workforce development initiative for the Bay Area, and look at how we can do that. I mean, we have, I have to share a record that Mare Island has on shipbuilding. We built a destroyer in 17 days. Like, that's incredible. So we have the capacity to do it. We just have to figure out, we have to update it. It has to be, so that there's assets around the Bay Area that exist that are perhaps underutilized or underperforming that we should consider and look at how we can support those things happening. We have the Cal Maritime Academy in Vallejo that, is all about, and it's part of the CSU system. So we have the educational assets, we have, the will of this body, I think. And so upcoming board workshop, when do we have that scheduled?
If the board thinks it's a good idea, then we will look at the calendar and figure out when to schedule it.
Yeah.
If you would like to do it sooner rather than later, I'm sure we could get it done in June, and it might be a longer meeting.
Yeah.
Happy to figure that out.
Yeah.
And when I say put your thinking caps on, I mean on the goals that you would like us to achieve.
Yeah.
Because that's the part that we need some direction on, and then what should this agency's role be in achieving those goals?
Yeah, because I think that, I mean, even with the California Jobs First committee that I'm on, like, we talk about clean energy, climate resiliency, all these things. And I'm like, okay, that's great. We can look at the jobs, but where are they going to work? Because
that's the key.
Right. And so it's great to have all this money to go towards creating workforce development, but if the jobs don't exist here, how do we create the job to begin with and get those companies that provide those jobs so that we can get those people into work in the Bay Area?
First off, I just want to say that this was incredibly informative. The process that you laid out in the slides, incredibly informative and so dense, but well presented that you made it interesting to someone like me, which I really, really appreciate. It's clear to me that this transit agency is doing everything in its power to create the right environment for what we're just talking about. I think it is up to organizations like the Bay Area Council and other regional agencies or organizations to push even harder for the workforce coalition. The transit agency can only do so much. So I think huge kudos to what you guys are already doing. You're already thinking outside of the box in every way possible when it comes to technology, partnerships, opportunities. And so I don't doubt that this is on your minds all the time and you're working as hard as you can, but there are strict limitations in what you can do and can't do. So let's see what can be done outside of this room, and also continue working towards what's possible. But the challenges that you're experiencing, the opportunities that come with these challenges, you're on it. You have there's so much complexity in our system, and you're pushing forward in every way possible, and I really appreciate it.
Others on the board?
No, I'm just, I've heard you and, Pip and, everybody talk, so I just want to make sure I'm out there. I'm in favor of the workshop too, just so, shouldn't.
Yeah, I would just say, Jessica, that what the Bay Area Council and organizations like us do well is to make public organizations do things well.
Yeah.
So, I'm here on behalf of the Bay Area Council to make this organization do what the Bay Area Council wanted it to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I accepted the position at the time.
Yeah.
To do it. And I agree with you. I'm not trying to knock anybody here. I think you're all doing, I'm your biggest fan. But I also think there's, we're in a moment here. And, I don't want to miss the, I don't want to miss the concert.
Yeah.
Do we have, Melanie, do we have members of the public signed up to speak? Let's go to the public, please. Go ahead, please. I can't see who it is because
Yes, hello, this is Commissioner Gordon from Vallejo. I just want to say, first of all, I agree both with our representative from Pippendu and the gentleman. We do not want to see on our toll bridge charge. Thank you from Washington. We have ample of opportunities to provide work, training. How you think they got skilled? Because they focused on it. And if we focus on it, we would have the same opportunity. We'll be making history. And I think this is important because students today are looking for opportunities to learn a wonderful trade that becomes a career. We have all up and down California. I'm previous military with my spouse, and we have seen where nothing became something because the opportunities such as this. And I just really want to echo the reason that you have your panel is to work as a partner and to hear what they have to say and to take it to heart. And I really do respect all that I've heard. And I hope that you consider from us as citizens that in order for us to build real working equity group, we have to consider the fact of taking advantage of opportunities as this. Like Ms. Pippendu stated, we did something in 17 days, maritime. No one would have ever thought that was possible, and we did it. So I hope that you understand that we keep the money in California, we will be prosperous and we can do more with what we make. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Are there other members of the public who wish to speak? Raise hand. Go ahead, Pat. Come on. Sure.
Pat Murphy, President Blue and Gold Fleet, contract operator to the Water Emergency Transportation Authority, marketed in San Francisco Bay Fair. Now that I got that out, my 3 minutes are up. I just wanted to thank Sean and his team, Tim and his staff. They put in a lot of effort. Appreciate that we've used Blue and Gold Fleet crews in your working groups. I heard the word challenges and Director Aldo said it as well, like at least a half dozen times during your presentation. I don't think you can emphasize that enough. On Monday, I had the opportunity to visit with some WETA staff and some Aurora staff, electric tugboat in San Diego, fully electric tugboat. The space requirements for the switching gear, the electric batteries, and the propulsion unit in that tug is just incredible. And so to fit it into a space on a catamaran is, as I said, a challenge. It's more than a challenge. And that is one aspect of hundreds that you're working through, and I just appreciate it. And thank you. I congratulate you getting to this point. So
thanks. Appreciate it. Other members of the public? Yeah, go ahead.
I do have another. So related to the vessels, are you going to have a canteen? So are these boats going to have like the cafe service and bike area and all of that similar to the bigger boats?
Yeah, just on a smaller scale. But yeah, with the emphasis on the bike capacity specifically for Treasure Island in downtown San Francisco.
And the bike capacity, is it gonna be similar ratio to seats on a bigger boat?
Right now, we're just discussing this today, debating it. So right now, we're looking at, between 15 and 30.
I appreciate it.
Higher ratio.
Higher ratio. Fantastic.
Yeah, sweet. Oh, I have a question. Given the complexity, does it make sense to build one and wait to build the other two? Like, why are we going forward on all three at once?
There's a lot of advantages to, getting into one contract with a single yard.
But there's probably just as many
There's pros and cons of both. Yeah, the yards don't currently have the capacity to just start building all three at the same time. And so what's going to happen is it's going to be done in stages. They might order the material for a lot of it or the propulsion packages, but they're not just going to stand up, all the boats at the same time and put them in the water. So we will have the opportunity, like we did, like similar to what you saw like on the Dorado and Delphinus, where one splashes and then there's a lag behind the second one. We're able to make corrections. In a perfect world, would I like to just build one and, test it out here for a couple of years? Absolutely. But with what we've seen, it's first in the US for what we're doing, but what gives us a lot of comfort level and, everyone we're working with, it's just an amazing team, is what they've done overseas. We're not just, the things that we're doing are new to the US, but they're not new to the world. And so we've seen similar boats in service today, in other parts of the world that do what we need to get them done. And we have the team members on staff and we're working with them. They were part of those projects.
Okay. And then, if you look at the package for the three and you move the federal funds around, could you fully fund one without federal funds? Work on yes.
We could fund one boat if we took the federal.
Work on it, yes, Sarah. Work on yes.
One boat, one single. It's a complicated question because we can't. But right now it's funded by TARCP and FTA. And so one of the boats is funded by FTA and two of the other boats are funded by TARCP.
But if I think I'm understanding the implication of your question, Director Moyer, is that could we do things on one boat if we remove federal funding from that one boat? You could only if you then chose not to use any federal funding at all for the remainder of boats. But to split the project up into multiple contracts, the federal government would require compliance on all contracts subject that are part of the project, even if one of those contracts happens to not be federally funded.
Because the project's defined as three boats?
That's if the project were defined as three boats.
Right, but that's if, right? You don't know. That's my question. Is that possible? To change the project.
To change the project, I'm afraid that's not a legal question. I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, I think anything is possible.
I don't think you could run to Treasure Island Service Management.
We would still build all three boats, is my understanding. We would just have a project that includes two boats and then another project that includes one boat. The project that includes two boats would have the federal funding in it and would be subject to those restrictions. The project that includes one boat would not have any federal funding in it. So we would say, we're going to give a preference to local hire. And then in my estimation, still would not get any bids from any local shipyards to build that boat.
I don't disagree with that based on my own experience here, but maybe you might get the ability to send some of the local workforce as apprentices. Maybe you might get something else where you could input those into a federal contract.
Yeah, we would have to
You asked us to think outside the box. so
Yeah,
I am.
it's good. We would have to do the work to figure that out. I think Aaron wants to say something.
We had the last working major shipyard here, Pier 70, until very recently.
Yeah.
So, and all the infrastructure is still there.
Yeah.
It's tragic that it's gone, but where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I just want to correct. So two boats are TIRCP funded. And coming into it, we were trying to figure out how to deliver all 3 boats that were needed by 2026 for the Treasure Island service, and so trying to split the procurements up to do one RFP for these funds and a different RFP for these funds and do them sequentially, which would put you multiple years back on schedule. So there was some scheduling. There's also, if you stagger them over time, you have escalation each year that would apply, right? So then we already have to probably backfill the budget with RM3 funds that we were originally awarded because because of inflation, right? So it's a complicated procurement already, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't leave it out there that it was
2 IRCP
it's
funds.
and in addition.
Yeah.
RCP, there are timeframes by which you have to use the funding, right? So there's just that. So it's hard to answer one question with one answer.
Yeah, I get it. My vision is that it's still one bid. It's still one contract.
Well, the contract language for the federal boats would be different if we were just.
But Tim said that
But now it's,
the
yeah,
boats are still built sequentially,
yes. But it's one contract.
so the source of funds could vary.
If it's one contract, then all of it will be subject to the federal.
So maybe it's 2 contracts, one bid. Anyway,
change things, but if we don't have federal funds attached to a project, there's the opportunity to maybe do.
right, but
What would we need?
to achieve some, I mean, we need to break our goals down, right? And our policies down. The end goal is to build ships here. That is not gonna happen with this procurement. It's not gonna happen overnight. So we have a workforce we're trying to get ready. One of which steps is an apprenticeship program. Is there a way to achieve that by looking at this opportunity? I don't know. That's just where my mind was going.
Yeah, we will explore that with the board's approval of the authorization to release this RFP. We will look in more detail about what we can do from a apprenticeship standpoint and see if there's any loophole we can identify that will get more trained local folks trained as a part of this contract.
Even from our 2 existing shipyards would be. I don't know how feasible that is, but
There's also gonna be like a huge opportunity for, and generally speaking, like there's a lot of money and opportunity in repair. And just maintaining all this equipment, right? And so that's one of the things that the workforce, they're trying on, but like, Blue and Gold staff and the local technicians, the engineers, there's gonna be a lot of work that's developed based on this, and there's gonna be I feel like there's a huge opportunity for more repair yards in the yard. Generally speaking, in the marine industry, that repair and new build are separate. It's kind of 2 different animals. But right now, there's enough work to support additional repair yards, and there's going to continue to be more work as we build these vessels up. And it's going to be high tech work that's really complicated, and we're going to need the staff to be able to do that.
I just want to add to that as well. Again, with the Port of Oakland and all of the support vessels that are on the bay that are going to be hydrogen or electric in the future, there's going to be more need for different kinds of services and repairs. And then again, these are smaller boats, so not 400 passenger boats compared to 150 passenger boats, which may reduce the size of any shipyard or the facilities. So that's, there might be opportunities just because they are smaller.
So what are we doing? What's the
staff is recommending that the board approve authorization to release the RFP for the 349 passenger electric vessels.
What is the topic of the workshop then?
The workshop that we would come back and have at a future board meeting and maybe even a special meeting is to ask the board what our goals should be as an agency with respect to propping up a more robust maritime industry here in the Bay Area, and for staff to identify challenges that are associated with those goals, and for us to settle on some clear strategies that we would employ to achieve those goals. And I think I've had a bunch of ideas about what the content of that workshop could be, and some of the featured folks that we might ask to come and present their expert opinions as a part of that workshop that would be informative. But that recognizing that we're not going to in this meeting, as a result of this action, have the ability produce the ability of in the Bay Area for these vessels to be manufactured here. What are the things that we can do to eventually achieve that result? That would be the topic of the workshop.
Thank you.
So again, most of the like I'm used to on action items, I'm used to asking for a motion on a bunch of whereas clauses and a resolution to do something. I don't know what we're asking us to do.
So when WETA's traditionally for ministerial administrative actions, there's not a resolution included with the packet. And without exception, in the 10 years that I've been working with WETA, issuance of an RFP has been that kind of a ministerial administrative action. This is the first time that it has been controversial, for instance. So what you're being asked to do is to authorize the executive director to issue an RFP for 3 new 149 passenger vessels. There is no resolution necessary for that because it is you can adopt that by motion. You don't need a resolution with whereas clauses because of the administrative ministerial nature of the action.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just real quick, I wanted to back up because I was so excited about the topic that we were talking about, and I didn't get the chance to say how much I appreciate all the work that staff did on this. I recognize how complex and complicated it is, and I really appreciate all that you guys have been doing on it. So I just wanted to say that first. And then with the understanding that we will come back for a special board discussion and workshop on what Seamus mentioned, I would like to move the authorization to release a request for a proposal for design and construction of 3 new 149 passenger battery electric vessels.
Second.
Okay, we'll take that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Now, did that include the workshop? I didn't.
Yep.
Okay. Is that, Melanie, is that something you'll be able to reflect in the minutes?
So hang on a second. Your motion was not just to approve the RFP, but to also have a workshop on this topic. Was that?
Yes.
Director Alba, did you second that motion? Is that, it looks like maybe you didn't.
I didn't realize that, but I think since the workshop was up on the staff report, I think I'm fine with that. If everyone else is fine with that.
I would second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Go ahead and call the roll.
Chair Wonderman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer.
Yes.
Director Alba.
Changes of significant. There. Right. Send me a link. Yeah.
It's not quite the same. We do have those assets. We do have. Right.
It's looking better.
It's like, agree. Like the snow's there, but it's still. Yeah. Yeah. And if they can get ski slopes, then goodbye.
Indoors. Yeah, that's a good point. We can do that. Right?
And it wouldn't be.
How come somebody had
It wouldn't be us. How do we? Oh, because, you know. There's such a way area to understand.
There we go.
All right.
Okay.
We ready?
Yeah, let's do
Try to
it.
get you out of here quickly. Okay.
Okay, we'll try. Did I call you? I called you on it. Do I have to call it again or are we good? Adopt reserve policy.
This is. You didn't adjourn the meeting, you just took a little pause, you're all good.
Okay, what I'm gonna try to do is, I just have 4 short slides to try to help explain a pretty dense and somewhat confusing staff report. And far less sexy than all the other items. But big dollars. So basically, what are the goals of the reserve policy? And it's, you know, to just bring attention to and bring, you know, to the process around some of these financial practices. We do have a growing need for cash to support not only our operations as those are growing, as well as our capital project, which is just growing bigger and bigger. It's to provide stability, it's to provide contingency funding, and to basically be a, you know, stabilizing force as we hopefully never hit another shock like we did recently, but it's just an important practice. And these are things that the board has talked about in the past. I know the last discussion we had about reserve was actually a couple of years ago when I gave you a 2-year overview. And then before that, in 2019, you had more specific discussions about what are the levels that we have available to us. The buttons are working. Thanks, Tom. Dana. So today, it's been a theme today, all of the challenges. We've had challenges in the past building reserves. We have reserves. We don't have immediate access to those reserves. Our funding sources are primarily reimbursement based, RM1, RM2, even RM3, even though it's our money, it's a reimbursement process primarily. It requires the expenses to be incurred before the cash comes in. There are some exceptions to those rules. We do get RM2 upfront. We can get RM3 upfront. But for capital, it's almost all reimbursement based. So you're paying big construction bills and then waiting sometimes a long time to get reimbursed. I won't name any names, but there's one agency that's taken us a year to get a reimbursement. So the fair revenue is our only internal really source of cash, other than some small fees that we receive. So the challenge also is that in a lot of these programs, particularly the federal COVID money, RM2 and other sources, you have to subtract out the fair revenue in order to say you need their money, right? So they want to be the last money. So what is the solution? It's trying to build more internal reserves rather than having these reserves sitting at MTC or other places where we have to go and get them after the fact. So the reason I wanted to bring this to you today is that when I bring the budget draft to you and the proposals to you next month, I'm going to try to implement some of these strategies that I'm about to describe. So it requires moving fair revenue into a reserve account because it's our money. We can kind of do with it what we will, but it's a formal process of setting aside and putting it in an account, and then using other fund sources to support operations. So we have state transportation assistance funding that comes every year, approximately 3 million a year. And we also have a balance in that account that we can use for this purpose. We also now, thanks to the passage and the final release of RM3, because we now have greater control over RM3, it doesn't have the same rules that RM2 did. This board and others worked so hard to get that for us. That's another source that we could use for this process. So the process is to have you adopt this policy today by resolution, which makes it the policy of the authority. It ties our operating reserve to the previously discussed metric of we should have at least 2 months of operating costs in the bank accessible to us at all time. I'm also recommending that we tie the capital reserve to basically 2 months cash flow, basically, in terms of our internal reserve, not just our external reserve, which I'll get to in a second. And that way you have sort of 2 calculations available to you to me to manage cash flow as well as to deal with unexpected shocks and things like that. And then we're still going to have external reserves available to us. And I have a chart at the end that will make this a little bit clearer. And then, as I mentioned before, next month I will bring you the proposed budget and you'll see this happening. You will see the fair revenue coming in and going out again. I'm going to try to use STA revenue to backfill for that. I'm still working through there's a bunch of rules that we have to get through to get that to happen. And I'm hoping to do it all next year so that by the end of the year, we have all these reserves set up. It might take a little bit longer depending on what all those rules are and the flows are, but that essentially is what we're trying to achieve. And so this is what it looks like. If you look at this chart, you can see the current practice. The top half is what we have today. We have $9.5 million on our fund balance, and that's what we're using to pay bills and take care of all our cash needs. We also have $12.9 million in reserves sitting in our account, but it's at MTC for STA. We have $60 million in RM3 flexible funds because that money was coming in for so many years before we could use it. And then we have in the RM1 program, there are a couple of different pots of money there, but they equal $12 million. So in the budget, if we adopt this reserve policy and we use this budget strategy, the end result would be I would have an operating and capital reserve shown in our budget that would equal $17.9 million. It would be 11.9 of that would be associated with sort of our 2-month operating reserve, and $6 million would be sort of an average capital need, cash flow need. We would still have $4.5 million in our STA account and $60 million in our RM3 account. So significant reserves still there, as well as we would not even touch the RM1 balance, which is really considered more of a capital reserve. So the capital reserve that is there today would still be there. Tomorrow, we use that for matching funds. So we use that mostly for matching against our 80% federal money that we get for all our repair and replacement money. And the RM3 money is sort of static, but the RM1 money sort of renews every year. Every year there's new allocations. So we use it, it comes back, and we just tend to have that money always sitting there. And it keeps recycling, for lack of a better word.
We're not losing it though, right? We actually utilize the
use it.
additional.
So, right, we apply for, we put a grant into the system and it's an 80-20 grant. We allocate some of that money to be the 20% match. And then the next year we get more money and we just keep using it as we need it to, it's a It's just constant churn in the,
Is it 12 million a year that comes in from that?
no, it's a lot less.
It's a lot
12
less,
is
What?
it's built up over time. But and as part of the RM3, the business plan, one of the things that Mike and I have been challenged with doing is figuring out kind of that long-term flow of as we grow the fleet, and we need these matching funds for a fleet that's bigger and more expansive. Is that money going to be enough to keep us going over time? Right now, it's always been plenty of money for us to provide the matching funds that we needed. So we're going to be working on that over the next year to kind of now flow this out for the next 10 years to see how it looks. But that's basically it. The idea is really to bring some of these external funds in-house, earn some interest earnings, frankly, on some of this money that we're not earning interest on. We do now earn interest on the RM3, which is great. So RM3 is a game changer for us. It's allowing us to have more control over our funds. That's basically it. It's sort of a complicated picture, but it's basically, I want the cash in my bank account, not somebody else's, and it will really help us out in terms of being able to get these capital I'm just trying to make sure we have enough money on hand to get the capital project going. The big part of it.
Yeah, I think that's what some of us thought was the object of RM3, was to sort of take the strings off.
Yes.
The organization,
Yes.
be able to use the money for what we,
Right.
we thought we needed to use it for, and not have to ask for permission every time we want to do something. As long as it fit within the scope.
Right. Yeah, and it is, it's a lot more flexible. It's there for us. But as we talked about last time, there's still a little bit of process because they collect the funds and then they send the funds out, right? So
Okay. Any questions? Go ahead, Monique.
No, Erin, I'm absolutely supportive of this. Thank you very much, as always, for thinking ahead. The 8.4 delta between the 9.5 mil and the 17.9, that will be built through Farebox over the course of the next fiscal year.
that's the goal.
Not coming from this.
Because we start with 9, right? Yeah, but yes, I mean, it would be most of the Farebox revenue for the year would go into the account.
Okay.
And then you would backfill it with the STA revenue. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It makes sense. Other,
So you can't,
go ahead.
oh, yeah, so you can't
Can't
get $8.4 million from, or was it 8.4?
Yeah.
From STA
Right.
transferred.
Right, I can't say, please give me this money and I'm just gonna stick it in my bank account. What they want to see is expenses in order to give you the money. And this is actually a scheme that it's not a scheme. This is a mechanism that we actually talked through with the MTC. We actually brought this problem to them. And their original idea was, well, you should do this using your RM3 funds, and then I was thinking about it, I was like, well, I am already earning interest on the RM3 funds. I'd like to use the STA funds. So that's what we're going to try to do. So it was a nice cooperative exercise in how, they were really trying to help us think in the past. I don't think we've really been able to do this because, there was just a lot of uncertainty. Did we have enough money to really do it? And now we have the RM3. It really helps us solve this problem.
Erin, remind me again the security of lake.
Asked me this before, and it is sorry. Yeah, and I think the answer is that it's not rated.
Right.
Can't remember what else we figured out.
Right, but we like the answer.
We like the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll find the answer and resend it to you. Yeah. I mean,
But we're
what a
not
nice
worried.
problem it would be now to have to say is LAIF our best answer at this point, right? As you know, it's always a trade-off between liquidity and returns, right? So if we can, it is the place most entities our size use when they don't want to manage their own investment and, manage their own asset investments. The alternative is to hire like a PFM or somebody and have our own investments and buy commercial paper and have a real.
The funds don't get commingled, like if another
No, no.
member goes down.
There's no commingling, and there's a, you know, in our quarterly, you know, we have our own account, and in that account, the returns are allocated to us specifically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll move.
I'll second.
I had another question. So what, along these lines, so if there's a, you know, let's say there's no regional measure that is able to move forward and there's just no additional Bay Area money for you know, to support transit operating costs. And things get, you know, kind of haywire around here. Is our money safe in these external accounts? Like, can somebody come in and say, well, you know, you've got all this money and they don't have money, so, you know, we're gonna take your money?
I think it would take state legislation to take our money. I mean,
Or vote of the, yeah, take a vote of the people, not just, it would take
Yeah,
legislative
people
action
voted for
plus a vote of the people.
for RM3, it's vote of the people. For this, for STA, it's state legislation.
RM2, any RM would take
RM2,
both
yeah,
a vote of
any
the
of the
legislature
RMs.
and a vote of the people.
Correct. Yeah.
The-
Yeah.
Yeah, there are other funds called TDA funds that WETA does not receive that are more vulnerable to regional redirection of funds to be able to solve that problem if there isn't.
Where do those funds come? What's the source of
They
that?
also come from the state, but they're
tax.
collected locally, gas tax.
Gas tax. Yeah.
Yes.
STA is also gas tax funding, but the way they are distributed or it's set up in state
Yeah.
by state regulation. So it is something we're constantly watching though, because we want to make sure it's part of our legislative program. We lost Lauren, but it's just keeping an eye on all of these.
And now that I think about it, STA is also protected by a vote of the people. There was a statewide constitutional amendment that the California Transit Association sponsored to make sure that STA could
Oh,
also
that's
not
right.
be
You're right. Yeah.
That's right.
redirected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, we have a motion, a second. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
No one has signed up.
Anybody? You all want to vote? Okay, roll, please.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes?
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono.
Yes.
Director Hughes.
Yes.
Okay, public comments on non-agenda items. Any members, anyone signed up to speak on an item not on the agenda?
No one has signed up.
Anyone
There's a
wish
hand
to?
right there.
Oh, there's no one.
We do have some?
Do you want to-
Looks like we do. Do we take down the,
Hello, I just wanted to.
Commissioner, is that
first-
you?
Yes, you have me?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So I just first want to say thank you so much for allowing Vallejo to have the opportunity for the christening of our new vessel. I was wondering, did you all receive my letter and my photos? So, you know, we don't always, thank you. We don't always get to take advantage of something so precious as this, and it's history. You know, I showed these pictures to my grandchildren and they're just like, wow, especially because they saw their uncle driving the boat. Well, it looks
Yeah.
like he was. And so, and then I shared the conversation with a bunch of the students here, and they was like, wow, we would have loved to have known that this would have been here so that we can see this. I had the opportunity as a teenager to, I don't know if you all remember when the Navy was here at Alameda, I got a chance to be on the ship boat there, and it was always inspiring just to know that you have access via water, air, and land. It's just amazing. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, you staff, the director, the board, I appreciate you all. And it will always be in my heart. Even though I'm 58, I feel like I was a teenager. So thank you for all of that. Love the fact that you have wheelchair accessible. Love the fact that you have bicycle logging. I mean, you know, to put the bikes at. I just love all of it. It was just amazing. And I want to give a compliment to the young lady who was doing the, passing out the apple juice and whatnot. She was so sweet to us and so patient. So again, please extend my thanks to all the staff that was working that day as well. And again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Very special. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.